You're listening to Creating a Universe, a Love Anarchy podcast hosted by William J. Rogers. On this show, we follow the journey of creatives, artists, and entrepreneurs who are making a name for themselves in the ever-evolving landscape of today's industry. Featuring an insight into both Love Anarchy and the Lovaniverse music universe, as well as the individual projects and stories of each of our guests, from the music industry and beyond. So whether you're a budding creative or simply interested in what goes on behind the scenes, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome to Creating a Universe. I'm your host, William J. Rogers, and today I am here with composer, producer, and label owner, Mr. Tom D. Witt. How's it going, Tom?
Hey man, hi. I'm doing pretty all right. I'm one day after the release of a new record, so now I'm chill. you got me at the right moment, so to speak.
Yes, yeah, man. Dude, big album has just dropped, man. From Dreamwalkers Inc, of course, one of your projects. First Tragedy of Klahera, right? And dude, this is a phenomenal record, man. It's so good. Congratulations on this release, man. That's massive.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's been, for multiple reasons, it feels like a relief to know that it's out. And for those of you watching this now, we're recording this on a Saturday morning, the 25th of November. And last night, or yesterday, the album came out officially. However, yesterday morning, I woke up at 6:30. I'm a morning person. I'm one of those icky morning people. And I woke up to a message saying that our album was not on the streaming platforms. So that was
that's the way to start the day, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, okay, if this is a foreboding of how everything is going to be, then fuck my life, that. And so I had to re-upload the album and get everything done. And yesterday was mostly spent damage controlling as much as I possibly could. What happened, fortunately, in the end, at night, we did a YouTube premiere of the entire album in a lyric video. And that went well, fortunately. And this morning, like Saturday morning, I woke up. The album's now on Spotify. It's on Apple. It's on all these places. So I'm a lot more relaxed now. I'm like, okay, it's out there now. And I don't know about you, like you release your own music as well, but every time it's like you make your mix, you make your master, you work hard to get everything done. But I'm always terrified of that moment you press play on Spotify, because I'm like, their algorithm does something to your music as well, like they will always apply something. And I'm always terrified, like, please don't ruin my mix. Please don't ruin my mix, So the moment I played it this morning and was listening to it, I was like, oh, thank God, it sounds like it should. Okay. So now everything's good. Everything's peachy.
That's it, man. And as you say, that when things happen like that, when they go wrong like that, it really provokes that anxiety. It's like, look, man, I've done everything. Like there's nothing wrong. And then something does go wrong and you're like, no, I can never sleep peacefully again.
Yeah, it's like there's always like when you're releasing something, and I think this is not just with music, like just in general with art. It's like you abandon your work, right? That's like the cliche comment is like, it's never done. There's always something you want to improve. There's always something you want to increase or whatever. But at a certain point, you also got to set like this goalpost, like, okay, once we're past this goalpost, then it's just out there, and then that's the album. And there's always like a love-hate relationship with that for me, although I got better with it over the years because I've released my share of records. But every time it's still like a bit tense, basically the 10 minutes before you walk up on stage at a gig, like that kind of feeling.
Yeah. Always feel sick, yeah.
yeah. Those, like, I don't necessarily feel sick. I just feel... I don't know. I'm always just tense. I'm tense, and like that whole panic / imposter syndrome sets in. Like I cannot do this. I'm horribly unequipped to do this. Why am I here right now? Like that kind of situation.
Yeah, man. It's like as well. You can have like done the mix and listened to it 100 times, but then when you send it to that person to get their feedback, you're immediately wanting to listen to it again, thinking like, does it still sound like I think? It's like I have almost like a new pair of ears on it now that I know somebody else is listening,
Dude, absolutely. And it's like there's a reason why in my process I tend to have a whole bunch of people I send my mixes to normally to make sure that I'm not crazy. Like, if you A guy like Rich
Sanity
Gray,
check.
you know, the bass player I work with many times on my solo records as well. That's one of the guys I always send my stuff to and just like, be brutal, please. Like, listen to this and be brutal. Am I on the right track here? And then he would be like, okay, it sounds pretty good, but why the fuck is the hi-hat making my ears bleed? And I'm like, okay, cool. You know, it's like that kind of situation. You need people like that to make sure that you're, you know, not missing out.
Yeah, totally, man. So, dude, before we go any further, I just think like if anybody is listening to this and they're not already aware of who you are and what you do, would you be able to give a little bit of an overview of yourself?
Sure, yes. Well, my name is Tom de Wit, and I am a musician from the Netherlands. I'm 36 years old. I like long romantic walks to the fridge, and I am very much a self-made musician who I've been making music since I was 14 years old, and when I started out making music, I couldn't do anything. A lot of people were laughing at me like, "Oh, you can't even make music. Why do you want to be a musician?" But I got bitten by the bug because I heard Evolution by Symphony X, believe it or not. That very song is the catalyst of why I wanted to start making music myself. Although looking back on it, it's probably a combination of that and my love for video game soundtracks and a lot of stuff I listened to when I was a kid. And I dove into music, and basically I have my vocal lessons, my keyboard lessons, that kind of stuff. But a lot of the other things I do, the production side of things, the label side of things, and just writing, recording, creating my own world is something I started doing myself because I had the intrinsic urge to do so. And I was not really stopped by a lack of knowledge, so to speak. I was just like, I'm going to make an album. I don't know how to fucking do it, but I'm just going to do it. And I'll see what happens. And I released my first I'm saying this between big quotes, album in 2004, which was obviously something burned to a CD. Yes, kids, burned to a CD. That was a thing in the past. To a very small audience. I think there's 10 people in the world who have a copy of that CD. And I really hope it's not online somewhere. Like I really hope that isn't the case. It probably is on some Russian torrent site or something. I don't know. And from there, I basically started evolving my writing style, my work. And I feel that in 2008, I released my first proper album called The Haunts. And that's what kickstarted my career. And I basically started my own label in 2011. I started releasing my own music under the TDW brand. That has always consistently been there. That's my solo outing. And that could basically take any shape. If I want to do a free jazz record, that could be a TDW record. If I want to do an electronic dance record, that could also be a TDW record. You know, it's not necessarily tied to a genre in that regard. And next to that, I've been in multiple bands, Nemesis, Mindsoul, and now I'm in the band Dreamwalkers Inc., which is the band that actually came from my solo project. That's how it originally started, but is now a band in its own right. And the new album that you just also mentioned, William, is I kind of feel that this is the statement of intent from the band's perspective, because this, like, sorry, just doing this push one more time so that people know what I'm talking about. But this record right here, this is the first album that we really wrote as a band, like equal writing credits. The guitar parts are by the guitar players, the drum parts are by the drummer. You know what I mean? It's like everyone really had their thing into it. And this was the first album I was the director, the one that guided it in a certain direction because I knew what the story was like. But there was a lot more collaborative energy going around, which I think really benefits the record, even though I'm very proud of my solo records and I will always keep releasing solo records as well. Mm-hmm. But I'm very proud, and that's a feeling that I'm starting to get today, now that the album is out, that I'm very proud of us persevering, because this was a tough process. Like, writing this album when COVID happened, when a lot of personal tragedies happened with band members. Like, we've been through a lot, my dude. And then being able to say, here's a 2-disc prog metal album that tells this story and that feels cohesive and people like it. Yeah, that feels like, you know, like, okay, we survived. We're here now. You know, like, yes. There's no denying what we can do now because it's here. It's tangible. It's happening. Mm-hmm. And that's the extremely short summary. There's much more that I've done, but there you go.
Of course, man. Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, man, dude, there's a lot to unpack there, and yeah, hopefully we can get to touch on more things as well. But I think the new record is a great place to start, man, especially as it's so fresh. Came out yesterday / today, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it came out today. Like on Spotify, it came out today, apparently.
Yeah, but by the time people are listening to this, it is definitely out and about everywhere, and people can check it out. Yeah, it's a phenomenal record, man. As I said, and you've mentioned there, progressive metal, double disc. It's a concept album.
It's everything that isn't hip in this time frame. It's if one thing, it kind of underlines that I'm a huge, massive fucking nerd, and there's like 10 people in the world who listen to this, and the rest is like, I don't get it. It's like, yeah, that's cool, fine, man. With me.
Yeah, that's it, man. I'm certainly one of the people that gets it, man, and I know a few others. So that's what it's all about. And I guess to start unpacking it, then, how would you describe the sound of the record and Dreamwalkers Inc? And I suppose perhaps yourself in general. You've mentioned a lot of things, but starting with this record, how would you describe that?
I think, okay, so I have to make two descriptions because I feel that there's what we're actively trying to do is try to get Dreamwalkers Inc. this way while TDW goes that way. You know what I mean? Like we're trying to separate the two entities, but obviously I'm involved in both, so I get why people would make the connection nonetheless. Regarding TDW, I would say that I describe my music as a combination of like I call it year zero metal. Like I hate the term new metal, but like the metal that formed around the early 2000s when 7-string guitars came into swing and that kind of groovy stuff happened, because that's definitely in my DNA, even though my music might not sound like it, but there's a reason why I almost exclusively play 7-string guitars, because it's like it's so embedded in me. But it's like a combination of that, progressive metal from bands like, like the Dream Theaters, the Pain of Salvations, the Symphony X's, that kind of stuff, but also stuff like jazz, there's definitely some Bitches Brew Miles Davis in there, nice. Classical music like Rachmaninoff and Stravinsky and that kind of stuff, like awesome. A lot of dramatic influences bashing into one another, creating this musical thing. And because of the way I sing, because I have a voice that I've had so many people hate my singing. Like fortunately I have people love my singing as well, don't get me wrong. Good. But yeah. Like it's a very specific, I know I have a very specific voice. Sometimes there's people that just have a good voice and everyone's like, oh, everyone loves that voice. I'm like, well, that's not the case with me. But I'm okay with that because I sound like me. I don't necessarily sound like, I don't really feel like like it's the Dutch mentality to be very Calvinistic and not being able to say that you're good at something. And I'm learning to, openly say that I do believe I'm good at certain things. And I feel that regarding my singing, it's like, it cannot be your thing. But at this point, I'm like, yeah, okay, I think I can sing. I think I've proven by now that I can sing a song. And
I love that about vocals, man. I think that, there is a degree of technicality in people that sing very well. You exactly. And I, I'm sure, know a lot of great singers who are objectively great, but it always comes back to that. I think like a voice is a character.
Yeah, and it's always personal. It's like I've had situations. I remember that there's bands that I listen to now, which I used to hate when I was 14 years old because I heard the wrong song on the wrong day. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't care about this. This is horrible. And then 20 years later, you hear a different song by that same band in a different context, and you're like, whoa, this is amazing. Why didn't I? So yeah, all that stuff kind of happens as well. But so regarding my solo stuff, it's like, yes, it is metal. Yes, it is prog metal. But I feel that the way I write and the way I approach things, it could be anything. Like, I like the idea that the moment someone buys my new record, and if they haven't heard a note, they will recognize my voice as me being me, but the music could be radically different. And I kind of like surprising myself, but also surprising the listeners. And so far that has helped in building a fan base that follows it. I released 2 solo albums during the COVID years, one of which was a very personal one called The Days the Clock Stopped, which basically was me, going through my trauma on record. And people really resonated with that and were able to do crowdfunding, which made sure that we could do like a CD, a DVD, and vinyl and all that kind of stuff. Like it was a crazy experience. And I think that by now in that career, the TDW career, I'm able to say like, okay, people, I have followers and fans that want to support me no matter what I do within that, which is really, really great. And I'm incredibly grateful for these people, because that's real value right there. You know what I mean? It's like, I've had discussions with people going like, oh, you don't have millions of Spotify plays. I'm like, yeah, but my fans paid my vinyl. Yeah. So what's your point?
That's it, man. Yeah, it's all about quality over quantity in that regard, right?
Right. And I feel that like this is a discussion you could almost fill a separate episode with, but it's like the quantity discussion is something I always have a very hard time with. It's like, okay, your numbers are great. Yeah, but how much money did you actually make? Like, have you been able to print a CD? No. Okay. So,
yep. And especially if you're in a niche genre, with a niche community and etc., then yeah, it's all about that. It's all about serving that community. It's about connecting with people, right?
Right. It's about connecting with that community. I mean, obviously, I'm talking about the money side of it, which unfortunately is a part of it, because in an ideal world, I would have infinite money and I would just be making stuff and not care about that, but it is the reality we have to face, obviously. And then, besides from the TDW stuff, we go to Dreamwalkers Inc. Like I said, it originally started out as the live band for my TDW stuff, but by now we've evolved into becoming a unit, a band that, creates music together. And I feel that if you describe Dreamwalkers Inc., it's like on this album, and I feel that this album would be a really good way to pinpoint it. We are a guitar-driven progressive metal band, which always looks at melody first before noodling. Like we have certain songs are not even that, like a song like Oldstead, for example, the first single we released for this record, is not necessarily the most technically crazy song in terms of, there's not, it's not the Dream Theater thing. Like, let's see how many notes we can cram into this track or whatever. None at all. But it works as a track. And secretly, once you start figuring out the tabs, we actually gave out the guitar tabs for that song to our fans when they pre-ordered. We got some responses like, oh fuck, this song is a lot harder than it seems. Like, yeah. But like secretly, it's and I feel that that's something that we do relatively well, in that we're able to create something that sounds organic and songwriting wise has a flow and a vibe, and there's like choruses and there's your hooks. But once you start diving deeper, then it's like, oh, those are like really jazzy, weird guitar chords being played there, or the vocals are actually a challenge to sing because it goes from this to there to the in one song, and that kind of stuff. So I feel that if you want to describe Dreamwalkers Inc. properly, I would say song-driven progressive metal. Very, very much about trying to bring the story across that we're doing within the song.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. And you know what? So much of what you've touched upon, to me, is what progressive music or progressive mentality is really about. And I think it's become quite a convoluted term these days. Progressive metal seems to be all sorts of different things.
It's like, what isn't progressive metal these days?
Almost the mainstream metal seems to mostly call itself progressive metal, which is almost there's something of a conflict in that, I think. But I think, man, it's all about the song at the end of the day, right? It's not about like musical masturbation for the sake of it. But there is like natural complexity to conveying the kind of scale of things that you want to.
Right. And I feel that the way with the album that we just released, like the Klahera album, it's the first part in a concept. Like this is, like it's a longer story, and I'm not sure if it's going to be 2 or 3 albums. I can legitimately say right now that I'm not sure, because we have to start writing album 2. And from there, we got to see what part of the story goes into album 2 and how are we going to, evolve it further. I always think I've been thinking that it is a duology in a way, like it is very clearly a 2-parter, but knowing how life can happen, I would not be surprised if it ends up being a 3-parter anyway. And then that's fine too, like whatever.
As you say, as the process goes on, it takes you to develop it in a way that's like, actually there's more that we can
do. You go. Yeah. So, and I'm also not adverse to, I haven't even told the band members this yet. I kind of dropped this in the chat yesterday. So, but I don't think they'll mind when I say this. I wouldn't be adverse to, for example, finishing the Klahera story and then maybe like writing a bunch of EPs or another album with side characters or whatever, because it is a rich story. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this. So we'll just see. But what I've learned by now, I think that's the one thing I've learned the last 2.5 years working on this, is that with TDW, I plan a lot. And I have planned a lot, which led me to releasing all these records and doing all that stuff. But I've learned with Dreamwalkers Inc. that it sometimes actually helps to just sit back and be like, you know what? This is the assignment. The song needs to have this and this kind of vibe. And I'll just wait it out and see what someone comes up with. Because some of the best ideas on this record were just either flubs that came out when we were together, you know, like someone would play a guitar and it's like, holy shit, what are you playing there? You know, and then that would be the riff that would carry the whole song. Or, you know, someone would need some time to figure it out and then it would come. So I guess maybe now that I'm 36 years old, which is still very young, but you know what I mean? It's like, I'm starting to learn waiting a bit more and being a bit more patient. Like, okay, the good ideas will come.
I find that very admirable, man, as well, because I really get what you're saying. I think that people like you and I, where you try and kind of, you learn a lot of things, right? You can produce and compose and play all the instruments and do all of this stuff, you know, think about the business as well. And so that can kind of send you down a path of obviously being a bit of a control freak, right? Because you want to be the mastermind behind the whole thing. But I think that what you're talking about there is the path to like really nailing it. Like really becoming a master, because not only can you control and do everything, the ability to actually let go. And it's more of like an organized chaos kind of strategy. Like let all these elements run wild and still kind of tie it together. That's
exactly. You know. Exactly. And it's like, I feel that when, obviously you got to have a plan. Like I do feel I like working within a plan or a time frame. But what I've learned by now, it's like, for example, if we're going to work on album 2 right now, I told the band like, look guys, I've been working so hard on getting this record out there, and a lot of it came down to me, which is fine, by the way. This is not meant as criticism towards anybody, but it's like, you know, I did a lot. So now I'm like, I need a bit of a breather first. Also, like, I am working on things, but my whole attitude right now is like, for the last 3 years, I literally released a record a year the last 3 years.
Yeah, amazing.
Going through COVID and going through everything and still releasing an album per year, which is pretty high output for this day and age. And especially the kind of albums that I do, fucking double discs with like all that crazy stuff. So I think in that regard, it's like, what I'm telling myself now is like, okay, I'm not scared that there won't be any content anymore. You know, like that's going to be fine. I got enough ideas, but I actually need to take at least the next year to just write and take a bit of a breather. I mean, I am working on some new projects, but those new projects are actually built around the idea that I can take my time and not have this idea of I need to have a new record done in November next year. Like that's the one thing I'm trying not to do right now, because I feel that if I do that, I might actually get burned out, and I don't want that. You know, you gotta guard your borders in that regard.
Totally, man. Play the long game for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a hell of a run anyway. I want to bring it back round just because, you know, you touching upon it there. And I mean, musical storytelling, that notion is just about my favorite thing in the world. So I'd love to get a little bit of an overview of the story in Klahera and what's going on there. And you said about it being such a rich world. So as well, just how you approach world building and things like that in a musical context.
Okay, well, regarding Klahera, it's like the whole, the story came to me, there was one night, the story came to me in, I believe it was 2020, I think, could be. And that record was interesting because I was kind of pondering what to do with Dreamwalkers Inc. at that point in time. Like I was working on my solo stuff and I was really putting all that energy in. And what I noticed is in regard to in regard to writing, it was very clear to me that the band needed a certain direction. Like they also told me, like, okay, if we're gonna do this, then we need to have something of a frame or a format to write in. And I wasn't sure what the format was. You know what I mean? Because with TDW, like I make this whole elaborate concept and I fill out the songs and that's it, but that's what I do by myself. So I really did not want to repeat that or literally have that same kind of thing. And then at a certain point, there was an evening, I don't know, I got struck by inspiration and then this whole story came out. about this young girl who was found in a forest and adopted into a village run by a very religion slash societal control kind of situation. And and how she was struggling with her inner demons, and how those inner demons actually turned out to be demons. I mean, I could spoil that. The album's out now. It's like the story of Klahera. I don't want to over explain it because I also want to keep some things open for interpretation, obviously. But the story of Klahera basically is a coming of age story sprinkled with demonic possession and societal psychology, and how groups function, and how religion, for example, can influence a society in a situation in which everyone is like, yeah, this is how we do things, don't question it, like that kind of attitude. And Klahera is basically the character that comes into this village called Oldstead and challenges the status quo, not because she wants to, not because she wants to be an edgy teenager or whatever, but because she sees things happening, and she's like, but that doesn't make sense. Like you couldn't you do it differently, or could you, that kind of attitude. And that leads to her running into more and more walls as the story progresses, because other kids think she's weird. Other adults, including the elders of the Church of Syriana, which is the main religion there, are like, why is she questioning everything? Like, this is how we've been doing it for hundreds of years. You should not be questioning this. And all the while this is happening, all the while she's running into that resistance, she feels something building inside of her. Like there's a voice inside of her, like breathing down her neck, like a deep demonic voice. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And at the same time, while that voice increases, she hears screaming in the back of her head. She gets all these visions that she doesn't understand. She is like, why do I hear women screaming when I'm walking past this statue? Why do I hear them talk about heroes and I feel like these people aren't heroes? Like, she basically is a prophet to something she doesn't understand yet. And the culmination in this record, as it builds up and builds up, is that more and more is being taken away from her. So she starts out as a kid being adopted by loving parents, Cyrus and Magonia, the two parents in the story, voiced by Rich Gray and Rania Bailey. By the way, Rich Gray you might know from Aeon Zen and Annihilator. And they try to raise her as well as they can, but obviously they're also a part of this town, and they try to keep their social status going, and they have a weird daughter that they found in the forest which keeps asking annoying questions, and they don't know how to deal with it, so everything kind of builds and builds and builds. It's like a pressure cooker that lasts while the album goes. And near the end of the album, like, there's the voice of Syriana, the goddess, done by Holly Royal from Disconnected Souls. She basically keeps pushing Klahera in a certain direction. Like, you got to keep asking questions. You got to keep questioning the status quo. You got to keep moving. Even though Klahera doesn't want to, but she does. And at a certain point, she loses her mother. Not because her mother dies, but because her mother decides to blend in with the town more, because she feels that she is being punished for being different, for having this weird child, but also for being an independent woman who is not like the other women in town. And it's really about the social construct of her mother being gentrified and taken in by all these other women and turning into a different person in the process. And Klahera then feeling like, okay, so the mother that raised me all these years is dead now to me because she doesn't exist anymore. Well, that hurts. And that's the song Mother Dearest, which is my favorite song on the record. I feel that that's the one that hits the most emotional beats, because like,
really big, long, epic song.
That's the 13-minute song. Yeah, but the reason we did that is because I when we wrote it, when I wrote the story and when I presented it to the band, it was like, that's the core of the record. Like that 13, I didn't know it was going to be 13 minutes, but I just knew, like, this song, even though it's a bit of a time skip because we go back to Klahera being small and then she grows up as the song progresses, but that whole idea of alienation, that whole idea of, you took care of me, you hugged me, you made me feel so loved, and now you're changing into this cold lady that doesn't want to be seen with me in public. Like, death, a lot of people talk about death as, physical death, but death can also mean that someone changes to the point that you don't recognize them anymore. You know what I mean? And I've been there myself multiple times. There's some people in my life that I really, really loved who changed for the worse, and um, who I had to mourn for in a way. And I feel that we really, really caught that emotion in that song in that regard. And then near the end of the story, like I said, I don't want to give everything away, but near the end of the story, Klahera's rage and Klahera's loneliness and Klahera's anger with the world that she lives in culminates into a supernatural moment. And like, that's the one thing I don't want to spoil. Just listen to the record, you'll get it. All the cues are there. And she gets banished from the village where she had lived her entire childhood. And that's the end of the record. And obviously, when we did the film, it says to be continued at the end of the record. I mean, that's also what we call it, the First Tragedy of Klahera. It's like, it's not done. This is the start. Like, this is part one, my dudes. Yeah. Like, there's a lot more coming.
Yeah, man. That's a fantastic concept. Like, very, very creative. I mean, you said that it just kind of came to you, which is awesome. But there's clearly a lot of ingredients that have gone into that, and your own personal experiences and different influences and things like that. I mean, do you feel like there was a lot of craft to this process, or this story really just was like a download?
I feel that the way the story came, the story came to me in one go. Like I sat down, and the way I wrote it out was like, and then this happens, and then this happens. So it was really just a rough outline, but the rough outline was 8 pages. Like 8 pages Arial 10. You know what I mean? It's like, and then I was like, okay, this is the thing now, you know, like, and that, so I feel that there is, well, we all get better at what we do over time by doing it more. And obviously I've written more albums over the years. The first Mind Soul album was also a concept record. And I've written my own share of concept records, even though not every TDW record is a concept record, but I've did like, well, there's the Clark stuff. Yeah, like there's multiple. And I don't know, for me, the story dictates the direction of the music in a certain degree. Not completely, though. But I do feel that if you have a story or an outline to write into, for me at least, it helps a lot, because then you know, like, okay, so within the story, the character starts feeling, huh, therefore, the music should sound like, huh, you know, like then it just kind of, and then it helps me a lot. And I know that there's obviously people who have different approaches to writing. Like some people actually prefer to start with the music, which is a completely valid approach. But I've noticed that over the years, it helps me to know what kind of mindset the music needs to be in. And that kind of goes back to a philosophy I heard from, believe it or not, a cartoon character, but I think it's based on a philosopher. I don't know who said it originally, but little tangent. There's a really, I would say, kind of 6 out of 10 animated film called Open Season 2. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's like a kid's movie about a bunch of animals going to save their friend on the other side of the forest, yada, yada, yada. Like, the core of the film is not that interesting, but there's one quote in that whole film, and it's said by a dachshund with a German accent. And he's standing up against the main character and is like, one needs limits in order to be limitless. And I'll never forget that. It's like, it's such a stupid thing to be like, okay, you know, this one animated movie that no one gives a shit about gave me that one quote. But I do feel that that's the truth, because the moment you write a story or a concept, like a framework in which you are going to do the whole creative thing, it helps me, because then I know, okay, this should be my mindset. This should be the direction I'm working into. And that motivates a lot of creativity, because the one thing I hear from a lot of people with writer's block especially is like, yeah, I'm just staring at an empty piece of paper and I don't know what to do. And I never have an empty piece of paper, because there's always something in the back of my head like, this should be an angry song. Okay, cool. How do I do angry? I can do this, I can do that. And then you start making choices, and then the song happens, you know? And I felt that with the band, translating it to the human dynamic of writing together, I noticed that they were actually very happy when I said, this is the calm song in which Klahera is sad about And then I would throw that into the group, and then the reaction would be, oh, I could do some fretless bass because that has a sad tone to it. Okay, cool. I can do a jazzy drum part. Okay, cool. Then you already have something, and then you can start elaborating your song as it goes. That's how the song Pushed came to be, for example. Like, we just knew, like, okay, this is the sad song. How do we do the sad song? Well, we need a sad sounding acoustic guitar. Okay, that's sad, right? What else are we gonna add? And then it goes.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you writing together in the room a lot?
Well, that was actually kind of funny because obviously during COVID, no.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, like, after the days the clock stopped, I've been open about this. Like, I have an ostomy, I have a history of medical issues. I'm just not, like, I'm a healthy person now because I work out and I take care of myself, but I'm technically not a healthy person, and it's just something I have to deal with. It's my life, and so when COVID hit, I gotta admit, I was a bit terrified because it's like I was in the risk group. I really did not want to get that disease because I had asthma when I was a kid. I had like a lot of stuff with my lungs. I was like, that's the one part of my body that is still functioning somewhat properly, and I really don't want that to get hurt. So the moment that first announcement was made, it was well, basically, I've been lucky that I have the studio where I'm interviewing you now is in my house, so I was able to keep work going within the limits of obviously what was possible. And we wrote on Zoom, we wrote on our own. For example, a guy like Norbert, when he came in at the start of COVID, he couldn't record himself yet, so I had to teach him, like, over Zoom. I would explain to him, like, okay, you do this like this, you do and he did have a bit of a basis, but he was very insecure, which makes sense because he never done it like that before. So it's also like, how do all these buttons work? How do I connect it properly? That kind of stuff. And I feel that we were lucky that during that process, everyone was willing to learn because obviously COVID was there and it was not going to go away anytime soon. So then you kind of just have to adapt, and improve. And so we did. And what was even more interesting, at least I think it is we lost a whole bunch of band members the year before. Like in 2019, we had a rather different lineup. We had a different bass player, different drummer, a keyboard player. We don't have a keyboard player now, which is on purpose because we were quite okay with changing up the sound anyway. But suddenly it was also like, okay, but we do need a bass player and a drummer. And trying to find musicians in COVID time is the weirdest thing ever. It was like, how are we going to do this? So when our bass player Björn joined, the first couple of times we talked to him was over Zoom. And it's a really weird, surreal experience to be like, hey, this guy's really cool. We have not been in a room with him yet, but he's in our band now. Like that kind of interesting challenges all popped up. But I do feel that we're lucky in the regard that we were all pretty open people. Like there's no, like everyone has their things. And we have multiple neurodivergent people in the band, which I actually consider to be a blessing because I noticed that neurodivergent people tend to be a lot more brutally honest with each other, like, I don't like this, like that kind of situation. But it was pretty clear pretty quickly that, with Sander and Björn, when they joined, that even if it wasn't the ideal situation, it was pretty clear, like, okay, this is something special we got here. And maybe in retrospect, it is actually even more special that it came to be because even in that situation, because that's the kind of situation in which you could also be like, we're not going to search for new members. Let's just first wait for COVID to pass. But the urge was just too strong. We wanted to move forward. And I am happy that with the 2 solo albums I released while we were writing this one, I'm happy that I mean, I had to write music anyway because that's just what I do. But I'm happy that also motivated the rest to keep moving because they could see that I was getting stuff done by myself through this whole weird COVID period. Because there were moments that I was also like, I'm not even sure how long this band is going to keep going. Like, are we able to survive this? Are we able to make this work in this weird situation? Like, those kind of questions will happen, especially when something as heavy as COVID is hitting you, But yeah, I feel looking at it now, it's like this process went a lot, like it was intense. And yes, we've been through a lot of personal stuff. Like I think every band member had something big happen during the last 2.5 years of writing this record. And we're talking from family tragedies to moving houses to whatever, everything that could potentially derail a process happened with us, I think. Yet we're still here and we have a record and we're a cohesive unit. And tomorrow we're going to have a beer together and we're going to hang out. And it's like, we did it. We're here. We're still doing it. So
amazing, dude. Congratulations on that as well, man. Like that's really cool. And I think that it touches upon, I think this is a really key topic in this day and age. Like the internet in general has done that, kind of weirdly made us more disconnected and yet more connected at the same time.
At the same time.
Change the landscape, right? And so, you're talking about this kind of less than ideal situation with lockdown, but I think that more and more bands are operating like this, right? Like people might be international and do a lot of stuff remotely.
I've seen multiple projects do this. Like I mean, I know it's a bit of a weird subject to bring up now, but I mean, Slice the Cake, for example, the death metal proggers who created one of their best albums with one guy in Australia, one guy in Britain, and one guy in Sweden, and it's one of the best-selling metal records on Bandcamp. It's like you can do stuff like this now, which is incredibly cool if it works and if you're able to vibe together on a distance. Yeah.
And that's the key right there, which is why I would be really curious to hear, like, from your experience of doing that, making a really ambitious record throughout that whole period, how do you, like, logistically and, like, how do you hold that together? How do you craft that whole record collaboratively, remotely? Like, it sounds like an immense challenge.
It was. But at the same time, what helped was, like I said, I tend to be, like, I direct in a way. It's like when music videos as well, I'm a director and I'm also the actor, but I'm also aware of how the bigger picture works. So I think the band was really cool with me having those reins, like being able to say, well, like I mentioned earlier, there was a framework. I made that framework. So I knew, like, okay, this is the angry song. So can you give me a really angry riff? And that helps because I'm not telling them how to play those riffs. I'm not telling Sander how to play his drums. I'm not, because these guys know how to play. Like, I am a studio musician. These guys can do it for real, so I'm not going to dictate what someone has to do. I basically just give them the direction and I will, and I don't think we've ever had a moment that someone brought something in that we really didn't like. Like, there are a few ideas that we shelved, though. Like, okay, this is really good, but this is for album 2. Like we have some ideas like that already. And then it would also always be a collaborative thing. Like, my attitude is I would, a lot of bands implode / explode / whatever, because people are like, I'm the leader. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm the one setting out the lines, yes, but I'm not the leader. Like, that's not how I want to see this. We are, if Leonard comes up with a great fucking guitar riff, then that's his great fucking guitar riff. You know what I mean? Like, I want to give everyone the agency that they should have within that process. And I feel that by doing so, that is obviously the longer game, because it's, in a way, it is easier to dictate, like, we're going to do this now and it's going to be like this. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's what I do with TDW. That's my solo project. But that's the whole point. Then the lines are set that I'm the one dictating it. But when in a band with Dreamwalkers Inc., we had a lot of talks about this, because it started out like that with Dreamwalkers Inc., because it was my music being played. But now I was like, okay, if we're going to do this, then I want the group process to change. And then I want people to have autonomy as well, but that also means you have responsibility. I'm not going to chase after you like a policeman or something, and sometimes obviously you got to be the band leader and you got to make decisions, or you got to talk to people and see how that goes. But it mostly involves motivating people in the right direction, I feel. And the direction is something you can set out by being honest and being able to say, I would like you to do this. That would be, and something in this direction. But also not, like, so that you give them a direction to think into, but also not dictating how they're going to get there, because that's their part. That's the creativity part, And, but I feel that a lot of it comes down to, and this is something that I've talked to with multiple people who run bands, a lot of it comes down to being a leader and not a boss. Because those are two radically different things. And I feel that when people are making music, especially when you're trying to tap into the creativity needed to get it all moving, you don't need someone to shout in your ear saying that the deadline is tonight. You know what I mean? Like, you need someone to remind you, like, hey, I would really like you to do this because I'm waiting for you so I can continue. But that's different. That's a different approach as opposed to being the slave driver, so to speak.
Dude, I'm with you. That's really cool. Really, I think, as you say, I think that realistically, that is true leadership, or at least good leadership. Because you're saying it's really more of a role that you're the person who is guiding the process along. You know the framework, and
right.
You're keeping that on track. You're the dungeon master or something.
In a way, yeah, it's like the DM of the album. Yeah. In a way, it is. Yeah,
the players are kind of carving their own path, but you're guiding the overall story. Something like that. And
it is maybe I'm overemphasizing, but it is their path. It's not mine. It's like my path is the story, and obviously I write my own vocal lines and I write the lyrics, so I do have agency in that. But that is based on what I'm getting from them. So the moment I'm getting riffs from them, there have been moments, and I really like this, by the way, this might sound weird, but I like the fact that I sometimes had a hard time writing good vocal lines because they wrote intricate riffs or used chords that I've never used myself.
Unique challenge.
Yeah, it's like Lenny, for example, guitarist Lenny is a master at picking weird jazzy chords with like added 9s and added 11s and that kind of stuff. And then he would send it to me. It's like, okay, this sounds good. And then I'll start singing. And then he's like, okay, I like what you're doing, but that one note is off. And I don't know about you, how that works with you, but when I write something, I often just write from, it just kind of comes out and there you go. That's what it is.
Yeah. Especially in vocals.
There you go. And having to relearn certain parts with one note being half a step down or up. That's fucking hard, man.
Yeah. When they say like, that needs to be a flat 13 to be in harmony with this jazz chord or something.
And there have been there were moments that happened. And I mean, I think it happened like 2 or 3 times. And if we're looking at the complete process, that's nothing. But I just thought it was really, I never expected to have fun with that, because if you would have told me this a few years ago, like earlier in my career, I probably would have hated that. And now I'm at the point that because I trust these guys, because I love these guys and I trust these guys, I'm like, okay, it's your call. So you're saying I should do this half step lower, then I'll do it half a step lower. And it's also like I said, it's trust. It's really about trust. I trust these people to also make the right call within that context. And that doesn't mean we didn't have arguments. I mean, especially someone like Sonder, for instance, he's just as much a micromanager as I am. So we definitely had some moments in which he was like, I really don't get what you're doing here. And then I would be like, give it some time. Listen to it a few times, or give me a pointer and I can try to shake it up. And there have been moments that I actually re-recorded parts because he had a better idea. Well, then I'm also not going to be a bitch about it. Then I'm like, okay, then we'll use the better idea because it sounds better,
I think that's a huge part of collaboration, isn't it? To like remove the ego out of it. So we're all going for what's best, not like fighting for our own ideas.
And the thing is, it's like, there's always, when you're working with people, there will always be a moment that someone says a thing that might hit you wrong because of the day, or because you're not doing well on that day or whatever. Stuff happens. When you're in a group, this happens. It's normal. And the best thing you can do, I feel, is just be open about it. Like, and as same as I'm talking right now, and I'm sorry for those of you who think I'm rambling and make no sense whatsoever. My apologies. But it's like, the moment the intention is clear, like when you're with a group and everyone has a goal, if you discuss like, okay, I want to do this concept record, this is the goal, that's what we're aiming for, then there might also be moments like that where you're like, I'm not being heard, or I don't feel like this is going to benefit it or whatever. Those things can happen. But because you have a common goal, it is relatively easier to deal with it. It's relatively easier to settle these kind of arguments, because at the end of the day, it's not about, it's not necessarily about your own glory. It's just about making something that is really awesome. And I know this sounds weird from a guy that releases solo records and has done as much as I do by myself, but it's like, even then, even when making stuff myself, even when it's just TDW and my name is on it, I try to disconnect my own being from it as much as possible, because it's like, it's not like I'm looking in the mirror like, oh yeah, look at me being awesome. No, far from it, actually.
Yeah.
But I do want to write music. I do want to put something out there and be engaged with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of try to step over that ego in general as much as I can, because sure, it's the ego that serves you in wanting to be on stage. It's the ego that serves you in wanting to release a record in the first place, because if that wasn't the case, why would you put that effort in? It's like, obviously there's always some ego involved, but I'm trying to be as self-aware as I can regarding what ego can do and what the effects of it can be on, yourself, the people around you, etc., etc.
Yeah, I love that whole topic, and that seems to be something that you're really into, and I see the themes throughout your music and such. And I love to touch on that. There is one thing I really want to get though, just because I'm fascinated by this whole process that you have, and I love how you've elaborated on the bigger picture concept. What I think would be really insightful is, I want to get just like a idea more on the ground of the actual logistics of you conducting one of these sessions. Like, I'm imagining that I'm in a collaborative session on Zoom with you right now. Is everybody sitting there with their instrument plugged in?
Well, on Zoom, Zoom was really mostly just meetings and talking and having a drink and just chatting about what is going on, and then making plans, and then everyone would record it and we would email ideas to each other, and that's how it would work. And we have an app group. We have WhatsApp, obviously. So then it's like, we have a WhatsApp app group that is filled with cat pictures and memes, but also as every well-functioning band should. I mean, there's no denying that. But a lot of it is also just really discussion. Like, okay, I like this riff up until 15 seconds, but there it kind of loses my attention. So can we maybe add a second there, or do like, I don't know, drop that note an octave to see what the fuck happens? Or, it's really about trying to figure out things. And I'm noticing now that, obviously, I'm in a different headspace than when I was 21 years old, for example. That we all are. We grow, and not hating on my 21-year-old self. I'm quite proud of what he did, and I still love that guy dearly. But I do notice that in my communication and the way I approach things now, I think I'm a bit nicer to work with now. Let's put it that way.
For sure, man.
Because it's like, now I'm like, okay, you know what? There's certain things that I am incredibly passionate about, and like, I will tell them, like, look, I'm sorry, but this part right here, this really needs to be like this. But instead of forcing it on them, I will be like, and that's because, opens up PowerPoint, starts explaining. You know what? My attitude is that I would never want to force anything on anyone without an explanation.
Because I say so. Yeah.
It's like, because I know that there's, and those are very toxic people, in my opinion. There's always people like, oh yeah, my word's the law. I'm like, yeah, okay, good luck with that. I don't believe that at all. I feel that, especially in a collaborative situation, if you cannot put a foundation to your idea, then how good of an idea is it really? Because I have a lot of random ideas on a daily basis. Like, if I would act on every random idea I have, I would probably have 20 bands, out of which 19 are completely unlistenable, because it's like, okay, let's change all the guitars into saxophones and put it through a metal zone and see what the fuck, it's like, no one wants to listen to that shit, but my brain does that. My brain goes like that. So that's why I have a sort of a self-editing process in which I'm like, okay, I had this idea for a few weeks. Is it a good idea? Would I be able to do it at all? No? Okay, then it probably really isn't that good, is it?
Yeah. And as you say, you have the kind of stability in yourself to actually, after you've self-scrutinized it to that point that it's passed your own filter, you're then going to pass it to the band and kind of get them to pick holes in it too, and be willing to take that, rather than thinking, oh, I had an idea, it must be amazing. because I'm amazing, and nobody can dare poke holes in it.
No, but once again, it's about context. There's moments like I have ideas for my own work, for the TDW work that I know wouldn't fly in Dreamwalkers Inc. But that's perfect. That's why I have both. You know, it's like right now for TDW, I'm working on an RPG soundtrack. Like that's my passion project right now. That's what I'm working on, which would never work in a band context because that's like I want to write this, I want to create this thing, I want to put it out there. And that's it. That's my passion project. And it just so happens that more and more musicians are resonating with it and it's taking a shape. And some of the band members actually like, oh, I would love to play a solo on that. Okay, cool. Awesome. You know, but it's like, I know that this is my thing. So I would not even pitch that to the band. I would just be like, yeah, okay, I'll work on this by myself. And meanwhile, with the band, we are going to start writing the next Klahera record. So then there's two nice processes running by each other.
That's it.
And that's also a thing why I always like being in a band next to my solo work, because I feel that the moment I need both. I need to be the control freak that does everything himself because I love making stuff and doing it the way like that. But I also need to hang out in a room with a bunch of guys with their instruments in their lap and be like, what's the angriest riff you can come up with right now? Like, make it fucking dirty. And then someone starts playing, and then magically that's your opening riff. You know what I mean? Like, there's a magic in that as well. It's just different. So I have both. How great is that, right?
Yeah. You're right, man. I totally get you with that. And so throughout this whole process with like Klahera, for example, are you kind of governing the master project? You know, like, is it start as like a demo and then people are sending you tracks ultimately that you're then kind of mixing together and that develops into the final? What's the production process, I suppose, like?
Well, the production process for me always has been that I am I'm very much a writer recorder at the same time. So there's been multiple records that actually my pre-production version ended up being the best take, and then that would be on the record, obviously mixed better. But there's it for me, because I'm so used to working right now in this. I mean, I'm literally doing this call with you right now on a microphone that is way overpowered for that specific purpose. But that kind of also shows how I work. I like having everything streamlined so that when I have a good idea, I can just record it. It already sounds, it's immediately on that level, and it just saves me time. And that's also something that obviously came from low financial options and learning as I go, etc. But I feel that nowadays with Dreamwalkers Inc., the way we did this one is we had like a whole bunch of demos that we evolved into full-fledged pre-production songs. So every song on this record has a pre-pro version with some have like significant changes. We're talking different verses, or, you know, like guitar tone being different, or different solos even. You know, some of the stuff on the record you hear now actually came to be in the very final process. I believe one of the last solos that Norbert recorded, like the one that ends the album at Chain of Consequences, there's this massive wah solo that Norbert did. And he recorded that in, I don't think I'm overreacting when I say that he recorded that in June of this year. So just to give you an impression of how things sometimes just go, like we didn't have a solo yet. And it was like, okay, who's going to do that? And Norbert was like, can I try? It's like, yes, but make it filthy. I want to hear you go full Pantera. I want you to go like make it the nastiest solo you've ever played. And he was like, okay, cool. And then that's one take. That solo is one take. It's fucking ridiculous. Like he just like, and that's the same thing I asked him later, and it's like, it's something that floats around in your head, and then the moment you're there with your instrument, then it just comes out, and that's the take. That, you know, that's how it works. But we have the luxury of doing that because Norbert also has the Kemper, the good sound card, the good speakers. You know, he has all that stuff at home as well. So we are now in the luxury position that when we're writing a demo, even if it's just a whole bunch of riff salad on a click track, I can literally just record it, put it on a recording, and it sounds good. You know, like we all are very self-sufficient in that regard. And I think in terms of how we work is we first sketched out the songs in a raw format. Like, okay, this is going to be the verse, this is going to be the chorus, and this is going to be And some songs I sang vocals for, and then it would be na 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 na, or actually already with lyrics, because some of the songs I already had lyrics for because I knew what the story was supposed to be about. Once again, writing within limits, because I knew that with Oldstead, for instance, I wrote those lyrics in 20 minutes, start to finish, because I knew what the song was about. I was like, oh, right, of course. Hey, there we go. Like, including the speech and everything. I was like, okay, it's there. And that's, once again, being limitless, you need limits to work into, which, well, that was one kind of the proven concept of that, because the limit was the song and the subject I was supposed to be writing about. But within that, you still have a lot of freedom. There's a million ways you can word something. There's a million ways you can sing something. So I don't feel that it's creatively limiting at all. And then I think the real proper recording of getting it all together was the moment we started recording drums, because then when Sander finalized his drum parts, that's when also Björn played his bass to that. And then, then you start layering it. But it's kind of funny because a lot of the guitars that you hear on the record, there's quite a few guitars that came from the pre-pros. Like, or better said, we did re-record them, but the parts are exactly the same. It's not like there's a lot of guitar riffs that we massively changed or whatever. It's like most of it was already there in the very, very first versions. And like I mentioned the guitar-driven part. I like the idea of us being a guitar-driven band. We have two guitarists who both have really different personalities. So when you hear Lenny, for example, Leonard, he is very much I tend to call him the John Petrucci wanker, like he has the Dream Theater parts, if you know what I mean. And it's great. He does an amazing job. And he's also a shredder. He knows how to shred guitar. And then Norbert is actually also, it's also funny how the ages work in our band, because Norbert is in his 40s. I'm 36. Sander is in his late 20s. Like we're all from different places in that regard, which I think also helps us, because the way Norbert approaches the guitar is he says he can shred. I don't believe that. I think he can shred, but he prefers to not, which is great, because then the moment some shredding needs to be done, then Lenny can do that and Norbert can just groove underneath it and be incredibly happy. But if something needs to be very nasty or jazzy, that's Norbert's territory. Like then Lenny is like, sure, I'll just play the riffs underneath and let him go crazy on that. And that's it. It's a bit like you have an endless palette of options to work with musically,
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude, I love that, man. It's such a good dynamic. And you have your own studio set up here, right? You have a live room that you're recording drums in as well.
Well, actually, the thing is, oh my God, that's a story in itself. I built Studio 2. I have a second studio on the other side of the city where I live in, Amersfoort, center of the world. No discussion. And no one knows where the fuck that place is. Anyway, I have a second studio and we have a live room there, and we actually did start doing drum recordings, and I thought the installation of that room was really good, and it wasn't. I'm not gonna lie. It was. We recorded for 2 days straight, and we recorded 6 songs, I think. Yeah, we record. Yeah, 6 songs. We recorded 6 songs, and we got complaints from the neighbors, and not gonna lie, some of those complaints were pretty. They were being a tad unreasonable, but I could still see where they were coming from. It was pretty intense. We're talking people threatening with lawyers. I'm like, dude, chill the fuck out. We'll be able to make it work. Like no worries. But
yeah, damn.
Interesting neighborhood. Let's put it that way. So what happened was we had to find a different studio, and luckily Sander, and I really want to emphasize this as well in this interview. I hope the world hears it. Sander is not just an amazing drummer, but he also has producer skills. Like he edited the drums for the album himself. He is a drum teacher who was able to record at the drum school where he teaches. So in that sense, we're lucky that we have a drummer who has amazing gear. Like the kit he played on is like this yellow Mapex metal drum kit, which just sounds, it just sounds so good. So in that regard, you just had to mic it up, put it in the mix, and it instantly sounded metal as fuck. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's so nice to have that. But also just at that point, we were obviously bummed out. It was like, shit, we want to do the whole album here. That was the idea. And fortunately, we were able to do the remaining 7 songs in his studio. So we had 2 relatively similar setups, different rooms, unfortunately. So that was a challenge to bring together in the mix. Like, to make sure that the drums had a consistency all over the record, because it will be like, okay, we did song number 1 here, song number 2 here, but song number 3 was done there, so it's like really trying to figure out how to bring it all together. But I feel that it's like, obviously it's up for the listeners to decide, but I feel that near the end of the record, there were a few moments I couldn't distinguish what was recorded where, and I was like, okay, that's good. Like, I'm starting to forget what was recorded where. I think that's a good sign, because that means that it sounds cohesive enough that it feels like one album. But basically, we did the drums. Then Björn came into the studio for bass, which is also kind of unusual to record the bass after you've recorded most of the guitars. But that was just something that happened time-wise. Mm-hmm. But we're lucky with a guy like Björn, because obviously he has an ancient Dingwall bass. Like, a lot of hip kids play Dingwalls these days, but he had like a Dingwall bass in the early 2010s when no one knew what that brand was. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny that we were like, okay, we have a Dingwall bass guitar, and we're going to use the Parallax plugin from Neural, because he wanted that. I'm like, okay, cool. But I kind of put my foot down. I was like, I'm okay with that, but we're not going to give you a gent bass tone. I don't want to sound like we're a record from the early 2020s, because everyone has the same freaking sound these days. Like, yeah. That's something that I've always been passionate about, and I've had so many discussions with people like, oh, your mixes are less loud. I'm like, yeah, but it's loud enough, because I'm just not interested in being in competition with death metal records, because that's not what I do. You know, like of course it needs to be mastered properly and everything needs to be audible, but I'm just not interested in being the loudest in the world, because that's not what we are. We tell stories, and I think we do a pretty good job at that, but we're not here to be the most brutal, man. You know, I mean, I love brutal music. Hell, I'm wearing a Peyron Bound t-shirt. I listen to tech death. I love brutal music, but we don't have to make it ourselves. That's a different thing.
Yeah, totally.
And especially in the mixing sphere, I mean, like, I know that I'm bringing up multiple topics that can be an episode in itself, but I've had a lot of discussions over the years with people like, your records sound weird. I'm like, well, can you not hear anything? Mm-hmm. No, I can hear everything. It's like, well, then the mix works, doesn't it? Yeah, but it sounds weird. No, it doesn't sound like every other record on the market right now, and that's on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
dude, I love that. It kind of loops back to me for the thing about the voice, about character, because if everybody sounds exactly the same, then it just becomes sterile, and that's the problem you have in the mixing world. Everyone gets like the best, quote unquote, best sounding thing, but then everybody does.
The thing is, it's like, and also the best is so incredibly debatable. Like, there's a few bands that I really, really love songwriting wise, whose mixes I hate. You know, like there's, especially in this day and age with a lot of, like, obviously metalcore came up in like the early 2000s and then evolved into deathcore and all those genres. And I feel that over the years, metal mixing has become synonymous with deathcore drums. Like, every band has the same drum sound, you know, like everything sounds and it all sounds really low and undefined, and there's been moments that people are like, wow, that drummer's so good, and I'm like, yeah, and I would love to hear which tom is which, because I have no fucking clue what the hell this guy's doing. You know, it's like, it frustrates me to no end. And also, especially considering the fact that there's bands like, I don't know, Dillinger Escape Plan, for example, who have proven that you can produce organic records that sound louder than everything else. Mm-hmm. You know, like there's no denying that if you listen to Billy Reimer's drums on the last couple of Dillinger Escape Plan records, that it sounds like an actual drum kit, but it is loud and in your face and obnoxious. So I feel that there's a lot of producers out there who, and you may cut out this quote and put it on the socials if you want to, but I feel that there's a lot of producers out there who are like, yeah, I'm just going to use this plugin and this set of presets because it'll sell. And that's fine. I'm not saying that you're not committing a crime by doing so, but I do feel that you're missing out on one of the most important parts of music making, which is actually implementing your personality into what you're doing. But yeah, it's I know it's a losing debate, because there's a lot of people that listen to music on streaming platforms are like, I just want it to be loud, man. I don't care about those details. I'm like, okay, sure.
I mean, part of the trouble is the whole way that we listen to music now as well, or maybe not we, because you and I just kind of discussed how we're really kind of traditional in that way with albums, but it's all about playlists and stuff, right? So people are jumping from the production of one record to the production of a completely different record all over the place from every track. And so, yeah, I guess that's it. People like standardization and consistency in stuff like that.
What I'm happy about now, though, that's one positive thing I want to say about Spotify. I mean, I could do an hour-long rant about why I don't like this development, but there's one thing Spotify does really well, and that's something that I heard this morning. I was A-Bing my song against the latest Gojira song, which I did. We used Sphinx by Gojira, which I really love. Good song. We used that as one of the loudness references. I didn't want it to be as loud, but I also was like, okay, I don't have to mimic this, but I do want it to be relatively competitive. Like, you will always do that somewhat. Obviously, you don't want your song to be 6 dB less loud than something else. Mm-hmm. But, important but, when you listen to Spotify, they actually made the executive decision to make everything softer. Like a few years ago, the minus 13 LUFs kind of thing, or minus 14, I believe. Mm-hmm. And what I liked is that I was actually going from Gojira to our record, and the difference was almost inaudible in terms of loudness. And I was like, I'm happy about this, because our mix ends up coming out a lot better because there's no squashing, there's no additional lowering they need to do or anything like that. You know, I was very pleasantly surprised by the amount of headroom and how it sounded. I was like, okay, it's good.
So,
like,
what are you aiming for then in LUFS, in LUFS?
Oh man, it's funny because I don't really aim for anything. What I do is I listen. I just listen to the songs, and one of my favorite plugins is the adapter meter, the AB adapter meter by I don't know who produced it. I think it was. Just search for AB adapter meter. You'll find it. I always put that on my master bus now and just load up a bunch of songs that I think this sounds killer. I like this. And then I just do comparative listening. Just AB, push that button, listen to what is happening. And with Dreamwalkers Inc., I knew that I did not. For example, Spirit Box is a band that I really, really like, even though their masters are ridiculously loud. Like, I would love to hear a Spirit Box record not mastered that loudly, but I know that the kids want it, so, you know, whatever, and I've already accepted that I'm not of the cool kids, so my opinion doesn't matter. But I'm like, when I listen to a band like Spirit Box and I hear the master going on a song like The Void, for instance, which is a beautiful song, and I love that so much, then a part of me is like, God, I wish I could get a vinyl version of this, which is not squashed to shit, because obviously on vinyl, they need to lower the mix, and I hope that there's more nuance popping out. And once again, it's a band from the core scene, so I get that they want to have that competitive edge, and they want to be at the top of that. But I'm just happy that in that sense, that Spotify being the leading streaming platform, and like I said, there's many good and bad things we can say about that, but the advantage is that they've actually opted for better sound and better sound quality, as opposed to making everything just really loud all the time and pushing it to a level that you're like, I'm tired after the first minute. You know, certain bands,
fatiguing, man.
Certain bands have this, and it's. I feel that by now, especially now that we're in the age in which we have tech death and we have like technical genres with heavy music, I feel that we should let go of that loudness war a bit, because a band like, I mean, have you heard Fallujah? Have you heard Archspire? Those kind of bands. Like, that is loud music, but their mixes are clear. You can distinguish the details. You know what I mean? It's still brutal as fuck. It's still heavier than anything else you've ever heard, but you can hear what the bassist is doing. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. Like, I want to be able to distinguish what people are playing, because why would I let someone play on my record if you can't hear them?
Yeah. I think that dynamics are just so key. It's such a fundamental aspect of music, and that's that whole philosophy of duality. Is like, you know, you don't have light without the dark kind of thing, and you know, like Opeth is just like they're just one of the definitive masters of that. Like such, like, and that's why I will go to Opeth so much more than straight death metal music. I love death metal as well, and maybe sometimes you do just want to slam a load of that.
Yeah, so sometimes it's Opeth, nice to have, you know, it's nice. Yeah.
But I can listen to Opeth, like the whole discography in one go, because, you know, you're having this constant like dynamic flow, and the heavy stuff seems so much heavier coming after this like acoustic section.
Yeah, but I also feel that that's something that it's a discussion I put into the music video I did for Fountains, like the second record I released during the COVID times. I actually made a music video that was my critique of the music industry, and I'm proud of that video for the message. Like, there's many things I would want to improve on it because we didn't have the camera I actually wanted, that kind of stuff. There's like, from a technical perspective, I could mention a million things I wanted to improve, but the message there's actually a part where I did a death metal room, and that was a lot of fun because we taped up the room like it was a Dexter set, like there was like plastic everywhere, all over the ceiling, etc. And we had like a baby doll, fake blood, an axe, and a table that was allowed to be broken. And I just had like 3 guys, friends of mine, who are like 2 of which are in death metal themselves, like Björn von Thorn, who was like with sorry Björn, I forgot your band name. I'm such a bad person. I'm sorry. And Janneke de Rooij, who is in Beyond the Pale and who's also doing projects. And they are like legit death metal people in the Netherlands. Like their whole career is death metal. And I gave them the script. And the whole critique that I'm giving is that I walk into that room, and first of all, I'm scared of the brutality and all that. And then they ask me, "Are you brutal enough, bruh?" Like, and then they're like, "Everything should be brutal all the time." And then I'm actually making the comment like, yeah, okay, but if it's brutal all the time, doesn't it lose its power at a certain point? Like doesn't it just become a static line of brutality, which basically means it's not brutal at all anymore? Mm-hmm. And that's the moment they chase me out of the room and they try to kill me. But it's like, but I wanted to put that message in there because I'm on exactly the same plane as you. It's like a blast beat and a scream hits so much harder if there's an acoustic part in front of it, which makes you go, ah. And then, like then it hits, then it's like a punch to the face.
Totally, man. I'm so with you to the extent that I've been really self-conscious recently that I went too far the opposite way. Like on mastering, especially, I've always gone for super dynamic. Yeah, I've really been struggling with that, man. It is a tough thing when you listen to your music next to others and like everything is slammed so hard in compression, especially if it's metal music. Oh yeah, people kind of want that, and then your song comes on and it's comparatively soft. It is hard, it's hard to find the middle ground.
It is a hard fight, and it's like obviously we all have our master. I mean, everyone has different approaches to mastering. For me, it's like I'm also a slut to Waves, like using multiple plugins that everyone uses. I mean, the Waves L1 and the L1 Maximizer are obviously a part of my mastering chain. I mean, who doesn't use that shit anymore these days? But there's limits to how you set it up. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't have to be minus 30, people. Like, at least I don't want to do that. Like, then I feel that I'm really losing the dynamic power of the music. And obviously, it's different per genre. Right now, I'm producing an EP for my good friend Kelly, a lady I do a lot of cover songs for. I write the covers she sings on. And we're writing 3 original songs now. And that is very much in the core territory. So I'm actually trying to push my own limits in trying to create a master that can compete, but still have some dynamic range to it. Because she does want it that loud. I'm like, okay, I respect that. And I'm going to try. But I'm also not going to squash it to smithereens because that doesn't work for me. And also, I don't think it would benefit her. Put it that way.
You're still trying to make the best mix and the best master. Right?
Of course. Of course. Yeah. And louder is not always better. Like that's my personal opinion. It's like, and I know that this is, once again, I know that I'm with a smaller group of people saying this, but louder is not always better. It's, And obviously, like you just mentioned, you don't want your music to sound soft comparatively to something else in a playlist. But now that we live in the Spotify age, that's the one thing I got to give to them. Like I said, they basically make the rules. They're like, yeah, everything's just going to be softer now. So it sounds more consistent. And I'm okay with that. Like that's the one executive business decision by Spotify I can get behind. Like, okay, that's fair.
Yeah. That's cool, man. I guess the final point I just wanted to clarify is that you said about you're just hearing, you're just listening at where to set the level. But once you have like maybe that first mix, that first master you've done where you've referenced against Gojira or whatever, like, are you not then like, isn't that coming out at a certain LUFS and you're looking to standardize the rest of the album to that? Or
yeah, of course. No, of course. It's like, obviously, like right now, I'm just drawing a blank on what LUFS we did for the record, but it's like, of course, the thing that you do, what I try to do is master one song, and then do that really well, and that's your chain. And then I take that master chain, and that's applied to all the songs. So it's like you make a preset out of that master chain you made, put that on all the songs, and then tweak the songs accordingly, and that will obviously bring it all together in one place, because you do need the consistency over a record to get to that point. And the same goes, for example, with drum compression, guitar compression. You know, that's the kind of stuff you want to make once and then stick to, because that's how you create that consistency on your album. And it's funny because I had some discussions with other producers about that. Like, yeah, but then everything sounds the same. Like, that is factually untrue. The moment my guitar player decides to add an extra layer here or change the patch slightly for this song, then there will be a different sound. But it's all about that relative loudness and having it on that space in the mix, you know, having the proper widening on everything so that not one song sounds like this and the other one sounds like this. You know, it's like, it's about consistency, really. So I feel that my group presets, I mean, this is really going into nerd territory, but for those of you who care, my group presets, I tend to define once and then use on a whole record. But what happens before that, yeah, that could be all over the place. I mean, it's like that just depends on what a guitarist wants. And I feel that with distortion, for example, with the rhythm guitars on this album was a pretty firm choice from all of us, like the three of us, in this case, me and the guitar players, like, okay, I think we need to make like one sound, and that's our rhythm, because that would be a good foundation to have the whole record on. Same goes for the bass that complements that, etc. But the clean guitars are different in every song. I believe there's one guitar patch that is used on like 3 songs, but every other song has different clean sounds from everyone. Solo sounds slightly different on every track. You know, it's just depending on what the recording needed at that point in time. And but because you have that foundation of consistent drums, consistent bass, consistent rhythm guitars, then you can go nuts on everything else, because people will recognize it as that album. You know, there's your foundation that you can play around on. And especially for guitar players, I've noticed now, especially with Norbert and Lenny, but also with others, because this has kind of been my approach with producing other bands as well. You just notice that in the in the pre-production, you're already hearing how the album, what direction the album's going to go in. And then you can also still make changes. I mean, you can also make these presets, listen to it for a week, and be like, I really don't like this guitar sound. Okay, back to the drawing board. Let's make a different one then. You know, it sometimes takes a few iterations before you're there. But I do think that consistency between songs is very important to create album cohesion. Because obviously when you're releasing singles, a lot of artists I know that release singles and EPs, sure, fuck around, do something different every time, because it's different releases anyway, so no one's going to tell you what to do. Hell, my own singles sound radically different from one another, like YouTube songs that I released, etc., because that's what I felt like at that time. But I recently got a question from someone who listened to the cover songs I did on YouTube, and they were like, will you do a cover album? And I'm like, yeah, but then I want to remix everything. Like, then I want to actually use one mix technique for all the songs so that it sounds like an album version. Because this is single versions, and every song has a slightly different guitar amp and whatnot, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. Yeah, I think that's it. And especially when you really treat the album as the art form, especially a concept album, you know, it really is so important, such a significant consistency.
It's like that the key word right there.
Totally, man. I want to switch gears and just ask a little bit about Layered Reality.
Sure.
And everything that you do there, and I assume that you said about founding the label for yourself. Founding the label, and I assume that was to kind of self-release, right? That's probably where.
Basically, yeah. In 2011, when I started, like 2008 was my first album, The Haunts, that was released through another label, which was just a bunch of guys doing it, and they meant well. Don't get me wrong; they're very nice people, but they didn't really do much for it. It was really just a logo on a disc, and I was like, well, then that can also be my logo, then. You know, like if this is what it is, then I might as well just make a logo and a name myself and just do it and see wherever the hell this goes. And that's what I started with in 2011 with Layered Reality Productions. And what was funny is we released an album then, I released an album called Scrapbook, which is no longer in print. I'm still pondering maybe, I think for 2031, I might actually do a remix of it or something. Then it's like 20 years old and then there you go. But that album was the start for Layered Reality, for knowing that, okay, if I do this myself, then I have creative control and I just have my own place to release my music into. And also it was also a bit like back then, I had like 3 webzines that gave a shit about my music and no one else. So I was like, okay, if no one gives a shit, then fuck it, I'll do it by myself. You know, I was talking to a few labels, but everyone was like, yeah, don't call us, we'll call you. You know, like that kind of attitude. And I was like, well, okay, then I wouldn't say fuck you, but I was a bit like defiant and felt that was the way to do it. And it has proven to be fruitful, because the moment that album came out, there were like 3 bands that immediately emailed me like, hey, can we join Layered Reality too? And I was like, there is no Layered Reality. It's me. You know, like I was nice. Horrendously unprepared for whatever was happening then. But I was like, well, I mean, let's talk and let's see what happens. And back then I was hanging around the Frisian metal scene, like in the north of the Netherlands a lot. So a few bands from that area were interested in working with me. And I was like, okay, let's put the logo on there and see where it goes, you know, see what happens. And I was involved with some gigs and that kind of stuff. And it organically grew into knowing better what to do. And with certain releases, we started to get more and more reviews. We started to get interview requests, you know. And what is so funny, it's really about that whole fake it till you make it kind of thing, because we live in a world that is so, a society and a world that is so based on being successful, whatever the hell being successful means. I mean, there's like a million definitions of that. But I basically, instead of saying Tom de Wit, I said Layered Reality Productions, and people immediately assumed, oh, that sounds big, so it probably is a big thing. It was me. It was just me in my room sending out packages to people and having a website which had news about these bands, and that's what it is. And now over time, obviously, it's in a way it is still the same operation. It's like I run it with a bunch of people. We send out the packages. We try to take care of all the business stuff as much as we can, and release music that, especially within the prog sphere, is cool and, you know, according to us, deserves an audience, but has a hard time finding that audience, because I was in that same boat. There were people like, yeah, you're not metal enough to be with a metal label, but you're not prog enough to be with a prog label, because like I was too loud for the guys listening to Genesis and not loud enough for those listening to Mastodon. You know, that was my problem. And nowadays, what I'm noticing is that, first of all, I feel that listeners, and this is a positive development, listeners are a lot more open-minded. I'm noticing that, especially when you look at playlists, it sometimes goes all over the board in the metal scene and everyone seems to dig it. So I'm like, hey, that's good. That's a good development. But what I'm noticing now more and more, now that we have Ramage Inc. signed, we have, wearing an Apeiron Bound t-shirt, you know, I'm happy those guys are with me. I'm noticing that more and more bands are coming to me because they're like, we're not interested in being with a Nuclear Blast or any corporate label, because that won't serve us. It won't help us in reaching that audience that we're actually looking for. And the way I run the label, and that's also why I think we are still around, because I've seen a lot of people. I've had some people that I'm going to sound really petty right now, and I'm sorry for that, but I've had people over the years starting labels telling me that I was doing wrongly. You know, people like, oh, you suck, and the way you do it is unprofessional, and yada, yada, yada. But they all burnt out.
Yeah.
And I'm still here and growing with every iteration. So I'm like, you know, it's I don't, like I said, I know it's petty, but the little devil on my shoulder is like, so about me not doing a good job, would you mind like, would you mind coming back to that? And I know it doesn't serve anything, but there is always that voice inside your head that says that, obviously. And I feel that the fact that more bands want to join, that we're talking with a lot of cool people, that the team is expanding, it says a lot about the attitude, because if it was about money, then we would have failed. But it never was about money in the first place. That's not the main motivation here, you know. So
yeah, you're being true to your instinct, man, and it's authentic, and that's what makes it successful and sustainable.
Well, yeah, and also it's like, because it's non-profit. So I had people like, but you're not making money on this. You're doing all this effort and you're not making money on this. I'm like, well, if I edit a video for a band, then I'll charge them, but I'll charge them significantly less than I will with a random person asking me for work, because they're with the label. You know, there's personal investment in there. But a lot of it at the end of the day is just doing the work. Like I had people asking me like, what's your secret? It's like, my secret is that I've worked for 12 hours to get this fucking video done. That's my secret. You know, yours, like, other people are spending time frequenting bars or doing whatever they need to do because they think it's good for their career. But I'm here like, no, I'm just editing this video for 12 hours. That's what it is. And what I've noticed more and more is that there's a lot of people who, and I think it's kind of sweet, but there's not a lot to idolize here. You know what I mean? Like, it's not very glamorous to run a DIY label in this day and age and do the thing that I do, because it's a lot of hard work. And you got to be able to commit to that.
Yeah, big time. And ultimately, yeah, you're just, you know, you're using all these resources that you built for yourself, which is all these skills, as you say, video editing. It's a slog, man. That's what it is. And you do it. And whatever, you build websites, you know, you put out records, all of this stuff that you've built for yourself, you're sharing these resources with other people.
Basically, that's what it is. Yeah, it's like, that's what I always tell people. It's like when they sign with the label, and a lot of bands really appreciate that. It's like, I'm not going to give you money. I'm not going to give you a bag of money, but I am going to give you experience, contacts, and someone who wants to think along and help you get better at what you do. And it is really different per band as well. Some bands need a website, so I build a website. But there's also bands that already have everything set up, and they just need to find where they can press their CD the cheapest. And I'm like, I think I know a guy. I can give him a call. You know, so it's like, that's also what I like about it. It's not the same song and dance every time, because every band is different. Every artist is different. Everyone has different needs. So you try to accommodate those needs as well as you can within the limits that you have.
Yeah, you're literally just supporting like-minded artists in a bespoke way, basically. Because that's interesting, because I don't know what people might have different perceptions of what a record label is, but maybe a very black and white traditional one would be that a label takes care of manufacturing records and sells them out. So that's
in the past, labels used to be like, okay, we pay for the production of the record and make sure that it becomes a good product, and then we take like 80% and you get 20 or something. You know, that's what old label styles used to be.
That was a good deal back in the day.
That was, if you had that 90, back then,
90+% onto the label.
Yeah, it's like, it's ridiculous. And I kind of flipped that on its head, because I was like, no, 90% needs to go to the band. I'm not paying. I'm not paying for the production process, but I am investing time and energy and doing all the things that I give. So my credit is not the money. My credit is us as a team being there for people, which is what a lot of bands want these days. A lot of bands are, most bands that I talk to are like, we have a day job. You know, there is an income. There is a way to sustain ourselves. It's just that there's a lot of things we're not that good at. We were talking with a new band that I really hope will sign with us soon, recently, who were like, yeah, what we really just need is someone to help us with representation in the press and getting out there more. And because they did everything themselves, production, like the same situation as with me, but they were just like, we don't have the time to do all that other stuff. So that's where you would come in. And I'm like, yeah, I have a team of people here who are dedicated and willing to do so. So let's go. You know, like that's, and I feel that is something that what I'm missing with a lot of labels, especially the bigger ones making a lot of money, not a lot of labels are serviceable. There's a lot of labels who are mostly surfacing themselves and not the artist or the band. And, you know, it's like, oh, you better be happy that we signed you, you know, you small person, we are the big label, you know? And I'm like, no, my attitude regarding the roster and the way I want to approach a label is like, I started the label out before multiple bands, as multiple bands joined the label, I started to realize, like, the moment we have like 20 bands on our roster, right? Say we would have 20 really diverse, specific, unique bands on our roster, then there's no denying what we're doing. Mm-hmm. It's like, then it's just power in numbers in terms of being able to say, you know what? What we do might not be for everybody. But if you're here for weird ass music that goes all over the place, join us. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I see layered reality these days. It's like, it's really just a coming together of all these bands that all sound incredibly unique, and they might have influences from other things. I mean, a band like Ramaging, for example, everyone's like, oh, they sound like Devin Townsend. Well, yeah, that is a big influence to what they do, but just calling them a Devin clone, that would not be fair, because listen to their music. Like, you know, it's way too unique for that. And the same goes for, you know, for what we do. People are like, I mean, there's even Dream in your band name, for fuck's sake. You're a Dream Theater clone. I'm like, are we though? Because I really don't fucking think so. But, you know, it's like there will always be people who listen to 5 seconds of a song and then say it's a Dream Theater clone. Then I'm like, well, says more about you and your attention span than my music, my dude. But
totally, man. Yeah. Dude, that's so cool. Yeah, I'm with you, man. And in a way, it's about creating that collective of artists, you know, in a sense of community and supporting one another, you know, which is just such a wonderful thing. Yeah, I absolutely love that. But like you say not for profit, but like you guys have to have like some investment in it other than goodwill, right?
No, it's like, obviously the thing is, what we do, like I said, 90% goes to the artist, 10% goes to the label, and the label in this case is just the money needed to pay for the websites, to pay for the DistroKid account, all that stuff, you know, that gets paid from the 10% that comes back into the label. And the moment an artist does well, great. Then there's more money on the label account, so we can also print some posters or do something else or whatever, you know. But I really am, I just want to emphasize that the whole idea is like, I am not sitting on this chair with all this equipment because of the label. No, that's because of my studio work. Like, my studio work pays my bills. That's my income. And a significant chunk of that income actually also goes to the label, because there's always unforeseen costs and things that you have to catch. So if anyone would check my books, I mean, I'm fortunate to have a really good guy doing my finances. You will see that the label in that regard is the worst business in the world, because there's no profits. There's, you know, I'm not making money on this, but because of my studio work and everything that I do, I'm able to sustain myself and keep the label running. So that's what it's about. There's a lot of idealism here. And in that sense, I tend to joke around that I'm a failed man and a failed capitalist, in that I don't care about a lot of those things. I care about making cool shit and building a world that is filled with art that preferably does not sound like anything else. You know, I feel that's my goal here. If anyone, like, it's the same as people saying, oh yeah, making music is my second nature. No, it's my first nature. My first nature is this right here. This is what I do. And my second nature is that I'm also able to hold a camera and make a company video for you, or build a website for whatever business related thing. And I'll do my best and I'll like it. Don't get me wrong. But my first nature, that's with music. That's all there.
Yeah, man. I'm with you. And so I guess the big drive with the label then is what? To connect with others, to be a part of other people's great music. And is that it?
It's really about just creating that place. And what is funny is, by now, with the reviews we're getting, the people who follow our music, like both the fans, the press, etc., we're now, recently I was at the big CD fair. Like, we have this massive CD fair in the Netherlands, like one of the biggest in Europe and the world. And I tend to talk with distributors there and just hang out and, you know, have a good time. And there were like two who individually, when I talked to them, were like, yeah, but at this point, when Layered Reality releases something, I just want to know what it is, because it's always crazy. It's always something that I don't expect.
Exactly. People can come to, like, ultimately your curation, your taste, right? Like,
that's what it is. Yeah, in a way, that is what it is. And it's not even just my opinion, because at this point, we have, with Lauren and with Rowan and with Dennis, I actually have like 3 people who, because I'm still the one doing the most legwork, and I'm okay with that, because, like I said, it's nonprofit. I'm not paying people a salary, so I'm okay with everyone chipping in what they can. And some people can chip in like 10 hours, and another one can just chip in 1 hour. Okay, I'm happy you're here. Join the club. And what is funny is we have some really interesting discussions about what bands fit and what don't. And it's definitely not as clear cut as that my opinion is the most, like, I mean, I'm the one making the final call, but there have been bands that I heard originally and I was like, I'm not sure. Like, I didn't hate it, but I was like, would this fit? And then it was actually the other three who were like, yeah, this would be a good call to make. Get these guys on the roster. And they were right. You know, like I'm not, then I'm also not precious about this being my thing. I'm like, no, this is our thing. We're all investing. So if there's three others saying this band is really good and we should give it a try, and I'm not necessarily feeling it or I don't get it yet, which is often the case, like sometimes something just has to land and it takes a bit, then I'm also able to say, all right, I trust your judgment. Let's see where this goes and let's try this out. And once again, I feel that is down to doing good business. Just, being able to step over your own shadow and be able to say, this was a good idea. This maybe wasn't the best idea. Maybe we can elaborate or improve on this or that, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. Amazing, man. It's fantastic work, dude. I really, really love that. I wanna just quickly take things right back to the beginning and ask about like when you first got into music in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where did it all begin for you?
Well, like I said, for me, it was, I think as a kid, I remember that up until I was 13 years old, I'm highly sensitive and I believe there's some connection with high sensitivity, autism, like all these things. I mean, a lot of neurodiversity is a Venn diagram. A lot of things touch upon one another. It's like, I was talking to someone with ADHD and he was, and like diagnosed. And that person was like, oh yeah, but some of the things you describe, I have as well. It's like, yeah, that's how it works. It's not a clear-cut standardized thing like you have this therefore you are And as a kid I already had this drive, but I wanted to be a video game designer. That's what I shouted when I was a kid. I was like, I want to make video games. That's what I do. That's what I wanted to do. And then, like I said, I heard Symphony X, and that was the moment because I already really liked my sisters were into hip hop, like really different music. And nowadays I actually appreciate that as well. But back then I was a metal kid. I hated that. Obviously it's like, and nowadays I actually listen to the records they used to listen to and really, really enjoy them. But that's beside the point.
Yeah.
But what is funny is that I already noticed that they were also playing stuff like the crossover stuff like Limp Bizkit and Anthrax and Public Enemy and that kind of stuff. And that already radiated with me. I was like, oh, I like that. It's heavy. I like that. And I really like movie soundtracks, like video game soundtracks and that kind of stuff. So as a kid from the 90s, I was hooked to my Super Nintendo and played all the RPGs. And I think that also formed my musical development in terms of appreciating classical music, appreciating that kind of soundtrack stuff. And then when I was 14, when I heard Symphony X and when I started to get more into that subculture of metal and I started developing myself, I noticed like, hey, I can sing, like because I was already singing all my life as a kid. I was always singing, but I just never thought that would be my thing. Mm-hmm. And then I took keyboard lessons because I wanted to be able to write my own music and I really liked keyboards. Like I had this huge power metal phase as well. Like I was listening to Dream Theater, but also the Stradivarius, like that kind of stuff, like really the keyboard driven stuff. And I had a few years of keyboard lessons. And then as I started writing songs, I couldn't really play. I had like a crummy keyboard that sounded like shit. And I had an old computer, but I was lucky that a hip hop guy that one of my sisters was dating knew how Fast Tracker worked. Now, I don't know if any of you guys remember Fast Tracker, but that was a program from the 90s where you would put samples in a spreadsheet and then you could play it back and it would, it would sound like it. And he knew that I was a metal kid and he explained the program to me and he gave me like a metal drum kit, sound samples. It sounded like shit, but it's like, okay, metal. And a guitar sound was like just like one duh, but if you pitched it up and down, you could play like you could play. Wow. I don't know if I probably still have those demos on a CDR somewhere, but I wrote hours of music with those samples because I was like, because of my high sensitivity as well, by the way, like I have a coordination disorder. So it took me a long time to learn how to play guitar or bass or keys because like it takes me longer my hands don't really correspond with my brain. Let's put it that way. In my head, I'm able to shred like Jordan Brothers. And then the moment you put me behind a keyboard, it sounds like pitched farts, so that's just what it is. So for years I was like, I cannot play guitar, but I can use this da sample and I can pitch it up and down. And there you go. There's my guitar riffs. So I wrote a lot of music back then, which I played to others. And obviously most of that was complete crap. Like when you start, there's no one this is one of those things I want to dispel. People like, oh, were you good from the start? No. no. And I feel that no one is. You know, when you start out writing your first songs, you're probably just stringing two chords together and that's it. You know, that's like, I wrote a song. And then people will listen to it like, okay, I don't want to squash your enthusiasm, but you might want to actually, you know, change the chord once in a while and maybe think of a verse or a chorus, you know, like I've been through that whole process. So when I started out, I literally just had a computer and a bunch of samples, which is the least likely thing to get into metal with.
It's a very unusual way to start, isn't it? Especially with that particular era of technology.
Right. You know, it's like and I had like people around me who played guitar, and I was in bands with guitarists, and I was never able to properly tell people what I wanted. But I did have these samples, so I would just program it and play it to them. And most of them would just, you know, like turn pale, like, I can't play that, you know, like, because I would write like, like all these crazy things that were physically impossible. Like, in a way, I had a friend of mine recently asking, like, would you do if you find those old demos, would you do a stream listening to it with us? I was like, I might just do that once just to cringe or laugh at how impossible some of that stuff is, because it's physically impossible to play. You know, like power metal drums for 8 minutes straight, just without breaks. You know, like
just pass out.
Yeah, it's like there's like, even with amazing drummers that we have around us now, I feel that would be literally impossible. But
yeah,
it's just that was my start. And then over the years, as I played in bands and I started singing more, I switched to vocal lessons. I have like 7 years of vocal lessons with pop, opera, like all classical, you know, all those different influences, which helped me a lot. And the rest was really just spent making stuff. So when, and I tend to say that 2014, Music to Stand Around and Feel Awkward 2, the album that came out then, I feel same as that Neil Peart used to say that Rush started with moving pictures. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I see my career. Like, it properly started with Music to Stand Around and Feel Awkward 2. That's the one I would, if someone asked me like, what is your earliest album that you're okay with when someone plays it? That one. Because,
cool.
And from a production perspective, there's a million things I would want to change, and I might do that at a certain point. Maybe I'll do like an anniversary reissue or whatever. I don't know. But it is one of those, I feel that was the moment that my songs got better. You know, that it actually started to make sense, and that there was like a good chorus there, and that the hooks worked, and that the solos worked, and all that stuff. And so that's basically how my development was. I defied odds by beating my own body, because nowadays I can play guitar in the studio and I'm able to record my ideas. And I remember that when I was a kid, people were like, no, you'll never be able to play guitar because of that coordination disorder, you know? And
yeah, man,
people would basically tell me that I couldn't do a lot of things. And a part of me is like, okay, I'll prove you wrong. Watch me, bitch, you know, that kind of attitude. But a part of me was also because the same as that with the Klahera story, like I mentioned, the whole demon living inside of her and talking to her, my brain is always going. It's not necessarily a demon, but my brain is always thinking of stuff. If I sit somewhere for a longer period of time, I probably have a new concept album in my head, which will be gone 5 minutes later. But that's how my brain works. You know, it's there. It
of course, man. I love that. Yeah.
Just keeps moving.
I wanted to ask you, based on your journey that you're talking about. It does seem like, you know, you spend a lot of your time in your studio working on lots of amazing things. How big a part has performing live been in your musical journey?
Well, I've always had I have a love-hate relationship with it, because it's like this is gonna sound like, again, the Calvinistic thing I mentioned earlier, but I'm willing to say that I'm pretty good at performing live when it happens, when it takes place. But over the years, I've had a lot of negative experiences at shows, you know, things not being arranged, situations being suboptimal, people not respecting my boundaries, me having to push myself past my limits physically, because, you know, people see me and they think, oh, there's this big, strong dude. I have an ostomy. I am handicapped. I'm sorry. My reality is I have a broken body. And within this broken body, I'm trying to do as much as I can. And I'm doing a relatively good job, yes. But there are limits. And what I've noticed is that there's a lot of people who only see your victories. So then their response is like, oh, you can do everything. You can easily perform live for 2 hours. And with me, it's like I can perform a good show for I don't know. I'm willing to say that I can perform a good show when I have the time to prep properly. And when I have, it's a lot of sun, isn't it?
Sorry about that. We've had some camera issues.
Yeah, the camera issues today are very interesting. I'm lucky that the sun is back there. Yes. I have a big window over there. That's where the light comes from for right now. Like
I'm still waiting for my new setup. Yeah,
it makes sense. And if this interview took place after 3:00, then I would have been in perfect darkness because it would have been impossible to film otherwise.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah.
But yeah, so regarding playing live, it's like the moment I'm on that stage actually playing live, then I am having fun. Then it's like, yeah, okay, I like this. And I've had many moments. The best gigs are the ones I can't remember. Like I've had shows which felt like we were just playing for 15 minutes and then it was like 2 hours. It's like, whoa, really?
That's the flow. Right.
Yeah.
And really get into that stage.
Those are the best. Those are like, that's the gigs you live for. You know what I mean? That's like, fuck yeah. And one of those gigs, I'm lucky that we had recorded that. One of those gigs is on YouTube, actually. We performed a live album called The Night at the Theater with Dreamwalkers Inc. And that was technically all TDW music back then, but it was under the Dreamwalkers Inc. banner. And that was one of those shows. Like, and everything worked. Like, it might sound weird, but the food was good. We got paid. We got respected. People knew that we were coming. You know, it was like, just the whole situation felt like, this is what you want. This is how I want shows to go. And the thing is that what I'm learning now regarding live shows, and this is something I'm talking about with the band more often as well, because back then I used to do a lot myself. I would be carrying the in-ear rack on stage. I would be plugging in all the cables. I would be doing so many things. And nowadays, it's like I talked to the band and they were like, we want to play live more. I'm like, okay, I'm okay with playing live more. I would even be okay with having multiple gigs in succession. But then I am not going to carry anything heavy. I'm going to take it easy. I'm not going to be the one doing all the talking all day because I need to save my voice. Like, I basically laid down a bunch of ground rules based on my experience over the years. Like, okay, you want me to do multiple shows and you want me to do it well? Then I demand that there's a bunch of people helping us out who are going to do all these things because I can't. I can do that for one night if I have 3 days of recovery afterwards, but I cannot do that if we're going to do 5 shows in succession or something like that. You know, that's just harsh reality of being a singer and being the front man of a band like that. And what helps is for years, I didn't really dare to voice this because I was like, I'm not allowed to voice this. I'm not allowed to take that space. I should just work really hard and shut the fuck up. You know, basically, I ran by myself a lot in that regard. Like, I've definitely strained myself on many occasions in this. And now with how the band is, now that we're a way healthier band with more adult people and we're talking about this stuff, everyone was like, yeah, but we don't expect you to do all these things. I was like, oh, okay. You know, so it was also just an internalized thing. It was also my own, once again, that hyper independence I mentioned at the very start before we even started talking. It's like, it's also a matter of trust. Like being able to say, okay, I'm going to put my trust that the stage will be built up as it should be in someone else's hands. So I can actually spend time being a singer, watching his voice and taking care of himself. And that's new for me. There's a lot of people who, like, I recently had someone go like, it's so weird. Most singers have a hard time actually doing something. And you're like the opposite. You want to do everything. I'm like, yes. And it's hard for me not to, you know, like twitching in the background. Like, what is Tom doing? Oh yeah, he's not allowed to build the stage. You know, like if you hear a twitchy sound, that's me not having control.
Yeah, man.
So it's like, I'm aware of this is for me, the growing process of the last couple of years. That's what this album proves right here. Like, it proves that if I dare to let go of all that I'm able to do and just let things happen, things will also happen. Like, yes, they happen if I do it, which is, for example, the RPG soundtrack project I'm doing right now. That's a project I'm helming by myself. I know it will happen, and hopefully it's going to be good. We'll see. I hope people like it. But this album proves to me, and I think that's the most important takeaway for me personally, that I can trust people more with the thing that is the most important to me, and the thing, because that's what it is. Music to me is. I tended to make the joke like I'd rather walk around the street naked and get laughed at than make music with people I don't vibe with, because music's so important to me.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Yeah, wow, that's great, man. That's a great experience, and I love the way that you have learned this about yourself and reflected on the situation so much. I mean, I guess that's a key theme. We kind of touched upon that, didn't we? But like, I see themes in your music, especially your solo music and stuff like that. You seem to have a lot of this aspect of self-reflection, and I guess even in the Dreamwalkers
I try, yes.
Story, But yeah, you're clearly a very thoughtful person in that way, introspective, I suppose, and like the themes in the Dreamwalkers story is like you kind of have comments on society and things like that. It's always been like that way for you, I suppose. You said about being a quite sensitive person, so
it's like I'm highly sensitive. Like, I mean, look, this is going to get a yay or a nay, but it's like I'm on antidepressants. Yes, I've had therapy, like I have been struggling with my head a lot. And the moment you're fighting your own brain, as long as I did, which is also partially what The Days the Clock Stopped was about. Like, there's a few songs on there that Clock Stop Part 2. If you want to listen to one song and you want to know how my brain works, check out Clock Stop Part 2. Like, that song literally is about me struggling for the first 18 years of my life with how over the top my brain is and how I wasn't able to cope with it. So I was just smiling. I was just pretending nothing was wrong. I'm the happiest, funnest person to be around. Yay, look at me being social. And then when I was home, I would cry remorselessly because I was so tired and I don't know why. And now I've learned that, oh yeah, okay, I'm highly sensitive, so I take in everything all the time. There's no stopping it. So I need to figure out coping mechanisms to deal with it better. That's the process I'm on a daily basis, and I'm better at it. I'm way better at it now than I was 18 years ago. But when I was 18, I found a psychiatrist who told me, he's like, your problem is that you're not ADHD, you're not autistic, you're highly sensitive. And this exists, but unfortunately, it is not in the DSM-5. It's not like a condition that you can just clearly treat or whatever. It's just how your brain is wired. And
so you are, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and unfortunately, we live in a world that is not exactly built on people like that. So you kind of got to work with your coping mechanisms and figure out how to deal with it. And I was lucky that the medication I got then from him actually worked, because there's like a lot of stigma around that. Like, oh, you're taking meds and then you're not creative anymore. It's like, I released 13 fucking albums on meds. So no, like that is not happening. It's like, if one thing, that medication for me, Venla, and for those who are interested, it's Venla vaccine. It's, I don't know the exact how it all works, but that's the thing that has helped me since then. So I'm happy those pills exist, because thanks to those pills, I can work, I can make music, I can do all the stuff that I do. And I think anyone who would look at my career, well, there might be a lot you can say about it in a critical manner, but it's not a lack of creativity. Let's put it that way. So
amazing, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that regard, it's like I've learned to live. The beast Klahera is carrying with her is obviously also something that mirrors my own experiences. Every writer puts something of him or herself in their work. That's normal. That's what we all do, because it's a way of understanding yourself. And I feel that what you're just saying about thinking about these kind of things, it's like, I think my original intent to be a nice, accommodating person, wanting to be good to people, wanting to help people out, originally when I was younger, that really stemmed from the idea like, if I'm nice enough, people won't leave me. You know, they won't think I'm weird and they won't run away and that kind of stuff. And well, one of the harshest lessons I've learned in life is that people will run away. Like they will. And often it says more about them than it says about you, you know?
Yeah, because they're their own people with their own crazy shit going on, right?
Right, exactly. So by that logic, it's like, weirdly enough, I've gotten better at letting go in that regard the last couple of years. And still it's not easy. There's sometimes you just have to let someone go. Like there's some bands that we worked with in the past. I mean, I'm not going to name names. This is not a mudslinging contest, but there's some people I worked with in the past who I really loved, who I really felt a deep emotional connection with, and who ended up, well, not being that good for me. And then you have to let them go. And even when I know, you know, like rationally, like this person isn't good for me, so I should, you know, get them away. A part of me then still is like, I'm sad because this is not what I intended. You know, like you don't start a friendship with someone or a working relationship with someone to have it end in tragedy, you know, at least not for me. And that's where my high sensitivity comes in, because there's a lot of people like, oh yeah, no, you just let it go. You don't think about it anymore. I'm like, yeah, about that. That's like the one thing I cannot fucking do. That's my problem. You know, it's like, it'll be there for at least the next couple of months and I'll need some time to process it properly. And that's something that now that I know how my brain works and how these kind of things interact with one another, I'm able to navigate it better. But I'm definitely not, I will be the first to admit that there's definitely days in which I'm just not able to, let's put it this way, there's days in which you either see me post nothing or, you know, I'm just not there because I need my alone time to just process whatever the hell's going on in my head. And I'm in the lucky position that being self-employed, working with the people that I work with the band members that I work with and how I function, that I've been able to mold my life somewhat around that. So when I go to Studio 2 and I'm having a bad day, I'm able to tell my colleagues, they're like, look guys, I love you, but today is just shit. So better just let me go into the studio, leave me alone for a few hours, and I'll get downstairs to get coffee when I feel social again, okay? You know, like that kind of situation. And I'm lucky that these people get it. And I'm the same the other way around. Like, I have a lot of people around me who also are, like, one of my best friends is a borderliner, and people are like, I could not function with a person like that. I'm like, I can, because I know what it's like to live in, like, I'm not a borderliner myself, but I know what it's like to live in a head that goes crazy all the time, so I can sympathize. You know, it's all about being able to understand each other's perspective, even if it's not your own, I guess.
Yeah, man. Yeah. The empathy that comes from that, and I get it, man. I can relate to you a lot, and I think that again, it just makes so much sense with the work you're doing, especially with the label and just in music in general. It's like providing that kind of support and empathy and connection to others. You know, even just the empathy of like helping them with their music career because they're like you and you know what they want.
Honestly, yes, dude, absolutely. It's like when I mean, I think I could say this out loud. I mean, Andrew, the guy from Appear Unbound, for example, when I met him, he was really at the start of his career and he already did a lot of really good, he already had everything prepped. Like, I feel that he was had already been in a few bands, so he had already built something, but it wasn't his yet. He mostly had been a supportive player for other people, and now he was building his own career. I've had so many talks with him over the years about personal stuff, business stuff, or, you know, like, that guy's pissing me off. And then I would be like, okay, vent with me because I know what it feels like. And the other way around as well. I've had moments I was like, I'm gonna kill this motherfucker, and then he would be like, no, you're not. You're not, Tom. Get back here. You know, like that's just, and it's good. You need people like that to have that kind of conversations with. I mean, Leonard, one of the guitar players in Dreamwalkers Inc., I call him my little brother, even though obviously we're not blood related, but we've been friends for over 10 years now, and he is the same. Like, he can sometimes send me a message. It's so annoying. He can send me a message like, are you okay? Because I'm getting a vibe. And then 9 out of 10, he's right. You know, like 9 out of 10, he's right that I'm either overthinking something or my stomach is rumbling and I'm like, fuck, I'm not feeling well. I'm not sure how to handle this situation. And then he would send me a message. You know, it's so telling because we're synced up like that by now because we've been friends for 10 years. And I feel that if, I mean, there's many things I've said during this talk that might be of use to people, but I feel that one of the most important things to have in your life is, first of all, try to understand what you need yourself. And that is a journey in itself, which is really hard and really complex. And you might actually be at a point in your life that you're doing things that are not good for you, but you're not aware of it. You know, like you'll figure it out later. And then a few years, I have many things I did when I was younger that I look back on now, like, that wasn't, no, you know, that was not good for me. You know what I mean? And now that I know, I'm noticing that I'm changing my demeanor and I'm noticing that I'm changing the way I live life. And thus, the people that stick with me are the ones that actually get me and actually have this situation with, you know, like have this moment that someone is like, I think I know, like with Lenny, I could literally be like I said, like, we need an angry song because it's about this and this. And he would grab his guitar, fiddle around for a bit. And I think the longest we've ever done about coming up with riffs, like a first riff, was a minute max.
Oh, wow.
You know, because we get each other now. You know, we're brothers and brothers fight. We also have our disagreements at times, but then there's also moments that he would call me and he's like, I'm stuck with this. I don't know what to do. Can you please be the big bro and help me out with this? And then I'll be his therapist and he'll be mine, you know? And it's like, but that's because I have the right people around me now. I feel that that took some time. So for those of you watching this in the near future or the late future and you're thinking you're not surrounded by the right people yet, a part of it is with you because you got to figure out what you need. And the moment you know what you need. But at the same time, the right people will come. Because I have to admit that I've had a few years in my life that I was like, when will the right people come? Because I feel really lonely. Been there as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, man, that's a wonderful message. It really, really is, man. And as well, the whole thing about the sensitivity and having to process a lot of emotion brings me back to one of my favorite topics, which is just kind of almost like the magic of music.
Yes.
You know, that cathartic healing property of it, right? And that's why you're making music all the time, right?
Music, I have often said I'm surrounded. Well, obviously, I mean, like I said, I'm writing an RPG soundtrack. I'm a huge fucking nerd. You know, it's like I'm surrounded by D&D nerds. I'm surrounded by all these people who do nerdy shit, and I love it. That's my life. And what is so telling is I've told people many times, like, music is the closest we can get to conjuring up actual magic. And what I liked, this quote, I read this quote on Insta. I don't know who this is attributed to because it was a comment someone made on, it was like a Reddit screenshot on Insta. So I don't know where it came from. But this quote was, if paintings are meant to decorate walls, then music is meant to decorate time. I was like, fuck, that is incredible. I wish I came up with that, you know, but it is a bit like that. It's like music is like, we do something weird and the air starts shaking and it makes you feel shit. I mean, that's magic. That's magic right there. It makes no sense once you really start analyzing it, but sometimes I guess the best things don't make sense.
Yeah, man, absolutely. As dude, I love that you say that. That it always gives me kind of almost like goosebumps to think about that, man. Because I think that's my infatuation with music as well. It's absolutely the closest thing we have to magic, man.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, there's a lot of people out there who play their D&Ds or their video games or whatever, like, oh man, I wish I could conjure up magic. It's like, well, art and music is pretty close to that, my dudes.
Yeah. We
have some entryways into making magic there, you know?
Man, anytime you see a depiction of magic in film or anything, there's always a sound that goes with it, right? You might see some visual element, but yeah, there's something magical about it. You might have that, you know, harp glissandi or something, you know, and I think that's it. I just imagine that you can see the whatever energy.
I mean, there are people. I don't know what the term is. There is a term for people that can actually see music, right? I mean,
they see colors and stuff. I know the word, but I'm gonna butcher.
But you know what I mean? Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
like for those of you, if you know what it is, put it in the comments, please. But it's like, but I'm always, I apparently it's also quite a struggle to live with. But a part of me is like, how cool would that be? I'm very curious to see what color the Klahera album has. You know, when if that would happen. It's like,
well, probably a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, I would expect so.
Morphing in different ways.
It's like a rainbow orgy of colors, basically. That would be pretty epic.
Yeah, that's it, man. Yeah, dude, that's so cool. And yeah, that's just such a beautiful thing that you're able to process your stuff and heal yourself in the whole catharsis of creating a record. But then you gift that to the collective, the human beings, the other people, whether it's a million, whether it's just one, whatever. Like if somebody else can also then connect to it, and it helps them heal and feel better too.
I think there's one. I think this is a good final story to share after the amount of time that we've been talking. But
it's so far too long.
Yeah, we've already breached 2 hours, and I hope if any of you is still watching this, you're a trooper, and I love you. But the thing is that I remember this really clearly. We played in 2018. We played a show with Dreamwalkers Inc. We had like no wait, it's earlier even. It's 2016. Sorry, 2016. We started with Dreamwalkers Inc. And like I said, back then, Dreamwalkers Inc. was just a live band for my own TDW music. So we played the first electric show. We played the first acoustic show. Wow, I'm an idiot. It's 2017. Sorry. Because 2016 was the first acoustic show at Proc Power. 2017 was the first electric show, which we played in a stage near Amersfoort, which was that was like our proper debut electric. Then the next show we did, we got invited to play an old chapel in the city center of Amersfoort. However, they never did electric shows, it was acoustic, and our drummer wasn't there. So we had to come up with a solution because our drummer was in Bulgaria. So it was like, yeah, that ain't gonna fly, is it? Like we won't be able to make that work. So actually then I wrote a bunch of songs with beats as backing tracks, basically taking our original acoustic songs because we already had an acoustic set, but then replaced the drums with beats, like really did ambient, weird stuff. And then we would play the guitar, the violin back then, keys and all that stuff live. And then it would work. And basically trying to make a creative solution for not having a drummer. And people really liked it. They were really responding well to the idea that, like, okay, we don't have a drummer, so we have beats. So I introduced the laptop. Like, ladies and gentlemen, here's the laptop. People were like, it was funny. It worked. Like, try to make it work. But what we did then was I wrote 4 pieces, which I called Clock Stop, which was an intro, a brand new intro, like an opening song of about 6 minutes. And based on those beats and then everyone playing their part, etc., and creating this ambience. And basically I used these Clock Stop songs to connect the whole set together. So all these we picked songs from multiple albums and then basically segued everything into one another. So the show we played that night was a 1 hour and 15-minute show that felt like one long song, even though there was like Chameleon was in there, Your Room was in there, all these songs that we already played, but just in a different way. And people really loved that because they were like, okay, we know this stuff, but we don't. Like, we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know where this song is going to evolve into. And for example, we did one of the songs on the album, we did a cappella with just 5 people singing, and that worked as well, which normally on the record is like really intense and heavy and metal. And the moment we started it out, and then the moment we sang the chorus, there was like this vibe going through you could hear the vibe through the audience going, like they realized, like, oh shit, it's Lest We Forget, but a cappella, like that kind of situation. But what happened was we played that show and it was sold out. We had like 120 people in that little chapel, so it really felt like intimate and awesome and beautiful, and it just worked. And there was this old man who worked at the place who came up to me after the show. It was like, yeah, man, he was like, I really, really appreciated and enjoyed this show. It was really beautiful. And my wife really liked it. And I was like, okay, so where is she? Like that's cool. Awesome. Where is she? It's like, yeah, she died a year ago. Excuse me. Sorry. What? Yes, she died a year ago. And I know she would have really liked this.
Wow.
You can have my money, man. You can have my fucking money. I don't care about money anymore. Like I've already won. That's sorry. Always gets me that one. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
It's like that's it, right? That's
especially
magic.
In a chapel. I mean, that is a kind of magical place for something like that, I suppose, isn't it? That kind of environment.
It was just he said it, and I saw him biting his. He was like old guy, different generation, so not that emotional, but I could just see the tears in his eyes. Like she really would have loved this. I'm like,
wow.
Oh, wow, yeah. Okay, thank you. So I gave him a hug and walked away, and like that I have moments. We all have moments as musicians that you feel like, am I reaching anybody? You know what I mean? Like especially in this day and age with algorithms just being shit and things not being shared, and just feeling like, wow, 5 whole people heard the song I just worked half a year on. Okay, cool, nice, yay, but then that happened, and I'll admit that that's the kind of moment that makes me feel like, okay, it's worth it. Everything's worth it. The carrying of the stuff, being annoyed with venues not responding, all the hours in which I felt like shit, worth it, completely worth it. Like that's that right there. It's like coming back to the magic thing. Is like apparently I made magic that night because he felt that.
Yeah, man, it transcends, those mundane day-to-day life. It turns
like every time you're angry, your printer doesn't work, which is a valid anger. Let's face it, printers are Satan. But it's like it's good to also, and I'm also saying I also want to nuance that because we have a lot of toxic positivity in the world. Feel angry, feel frustrated. I'm not going to be telling people not to feel anything. If you have a shit day, you have a shit day, and it's completely valid.
Metal music is fantastic at that, right?
I know.
That's what a lot of it's about,
Yeah, why the hell do you think I'm listening to all this crazy stuff? It's like, yeah, I have my shit days, and then it's really nice to blast some Between the Buried and Me and feel better afterwards. Yes, absolutely. But it's like both things can coexist. You can have such a beautiful experience that transcends the mundanity, as you just said. But at the same time, it's also completely valid to be annoyed with things or have different experiences as well. It's different for everybody.
That's beautiful, man. Yeah, well, I really, really love it. And I just want to ask you very quickly. We've touched on so many wonderful things, but I'm curious how you might want to tackle this because business and side of things and the more abstract side of things. Like, if you could give any advice to other musicians and creators and people like us, like if just one piece of advice that kind of comes to mind off the top of your head right now, what would it be?
Keep going. Don't stop. The moment, it's like the one thing that I've seen with a lot of people, we have this, the intrinsic motivation should be there to make something. It should not be done for the numbers. It should not be done for all that. And I'm like, this is coming from a guy, I don't have that high numbers. If you look at my Spotify, it's laughable. Like that's not what it's about for me. It's about creating cool stuff. And one of the major questions you might want to ask yourself, and that's what I've seen with a lot of artists that I respect, and even some really big bands, they will give you the same advice. Like, I know that I've heard Joe Duplantier from Gojira once say that he's like, yeah, it's nice that we're so big now and that it's being picked up, but the intrinsic drive is that we want to write what we want to write. It's not, we're not writing a heavy song to think, oh yeah, the metal kids will like this heavy song. No, we're writing a heavy song because Earth is being destroyed and we're angry. That's why we write the fucking song. And I feel that is something that you have to realize when you're getting into music and art. It's like, yes, like I said, we all have our weakness. I definitely have days in which I'm like, why am I working as hard as I do? No one gives a shit. Yes, those days happen. But fun fact, I've talked to musicians who I consider to be way higher up the ladder, with bigger careers or bigger venues or whatever. And they say the exact same thing. It's like, you will have those thoughts. You will feel bad. You will feel demotivated. You will feel like what I do doesn't matter. And then the next day you write that one riff and then you're like, fuck yeah, that's it. That's the thing. That's why I'm doing it. So keep going, basically, because yeah, there will be shit days. And that's okay. They exist. And, once again, I believe this is a Buddhist philosophy, but you cannot appreciate the highs when you don't have the lows. And I am not much of a Buddhist, but I do agree with that. Like, when you got to feel like shit once in a while to appreciate when it does go well. And then the moment it does go well, just savor it. Grab those moments and keep them with you as long as you can.
Yeah, man. Right on. Amazing. I absolutely love that. And I can continue to talk to you all day gladly, man. It's been such a pleasure. And we've gone on for so long. We'll have to do another one again sometime, man, because
I would love to. There's like now we had if this is the introductory podcast, so to speak, of everything that I do, then maybe the next time we can just talk about a few specific topics and dive into those or whatever.
100%.
See what works.
100%. For now, though, before we cut it, is there anything in particular that you want to get in there?
Man, I've already said so much. I'm just happy you wanted to have me here, man. It was really appreciated. Everyone watching at home, I hope this has inspired you to a certain extent. I hope you're interested and curious in what I do musically or creatively. You don't have to, of course. I'm also I'll be here anyway, so to speak. And I wish each and every one of you a really pleasant rest of your day, night, morning, whatever the hell you're going to be doing. You're going to smash it and you're going to be good at it. I know you will.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Creating a Universe. A special thank you to Tom DeVitt for joining me. I really enjoyed this one. Be sure to check out Tom's solo work at tdwprog.com, as well as the band at dreamwalkersinc.com and the label at layered-reality.com. Links will be in the show notes. That's all for this one. I'll see you next time.